Throughout the ancient world, certain places continue to defy explanation despite decades of research. The massive blocks of Great Pyramid of Giza are aligned with astonishing precision, raising questions about the engineering knowledge behind them. At Stonehenge, towering stones track celestial movements with uncanny accuracy. High in the Andes, Machu Picchu reveals advanced construction techniques that have withstood centuries of earthquakes. Meanwhile, the vast city of Teotihuacan follows a precise urban plan, whose meaning is still debated. These iconic sites are more than historical landmarks. They are enduring mysteries that continue to challenge everything we think we know about ancient civilizations. The hilltop city of Van Tushpa Walls rises above the shimmering expanse of Lake Van, like a silent testament to a civilization that understood both the brutality of landscape and the elegance of precision. Built as the capital of the ancient kingdom of Urartu around the 9th century BCE, this formidable citadel, known historically as Tushpa, was not simply positioned on high ground for defense. It was anchored into a massive limestone ridge that dropped sharply toward the lake below. From a distance, the fortress appears almost inseparable from the rock itself, as though it had grown organically out of the mountain. Yet upon closer inspection, the illusion dissolves into something even more astonishing: a carefully engineered system of walls, terraces, and structural alignments that reveal a level of architectural control far beyond what one might expect from an early Iron Age society. The question that emerges immediately is not merely how such a city was built, but how it was built with such refinement under such constraints. The geographical setting of Tushpa is both its greatest strength and its most perplexing challenge. The steep cliffside offers natural fortification, but it also presents a logistical nightmare. Transporting multi-ton stone blocks up a rugged incline without modern machinery would have required extraordinary coordination, manpower, and ingenuity. And yet the builders of Urartu did not settle for crude or purely functional construction. Instead, they created a structure that balances mass with precision, strength with symmetry. The lower sections of the walls are composed of large, carefully shaped stone blocks, forming a durable base that has withstood nearly 3 millennia of environmental stress. Above these foundations once stood mud brick superstructures, now largely eroded by time, but the surviving stonework continues to convey the original ambition of the design. Even in ruin, the city retains a sense of deliberate order, an architectural language that speaks of planning, measurement, and control. At the heart of the mystery lies one of the most compelling features of Van Tushpa: the astonishing geometric precision of its stone masonry. This is not simply a matter of stacking stones to form a barrier. The blocks used in many sections of the wall are cut and fitted with such accuracy that the joints between them are nearly invisible. In some places, the stones interlock so tightly that even a thin blade cannot be inserted between them. There is a consistency to the angles, a uniformity in the surfaces, and a deliberate shaping of edges that suggests not improvisation, but a systematic approach to stoneworking. Each block appears to have been measured, carved, and placed with an awareness of its role within a larger geometric scheme. The walls are not random accumulations of material, they are compositions assembled with intent. This level of precision raises profound questions about the tools and techniques available to the Urartians. Working with hard stone using early iron tools would have been slow and labor-intensive, yet the finish achieved on many of these blocks rivals that of later, more technologically advanced civilizations. The one possibility is that the builders employed abrasion techniques using sand, water, and repeated grinding to achieve smooth surfaces and exact fits. Another theory suggests that they developed specialized metal tools, perhaps harder or more refined than those typically associated with the period, that allowed for more controlled cutting. Regardless of the method, the outcome is undeniable: a masonry style that prioritizes tight joints, structural cohesion, and geometric harmony. What makes this precision even more remarkable is the context in which it appears. Unlike the relatively stable, flat terrains of other ancient monumental sites, Tushpa's walls were constructed on uneven, sloping rock. Achieving consistent alignment under such conditions would have required not only skill in shaping individual stones, but also an advanced understanding of leveling, load distribution, and spatial planning. The builders had to account for irregularities in the bedrock, adjusting each block to maintain the integrity of the overall structure. This suggests the use of measuring systems, perhaps simple but effective tools for ensuring straight lines, right angles, and proportional relationships. The presence of such systems implies a conceptual grasp of geometry that goes beyond practical necessity and enters the realm of applied design. In many ways, the walls of Tushpa can be seen as a dialogue between human intention and natural form. The cliff provides the raw canvas, but it is the precision of the stonework that transforms it into architecture. The clean lines of the masonry contrast with the roughness of the surrounding rock, creating a visual and structural distinction between what is natural and what is engineered. And yet, the two are integrated so seamlessly that the boundary between them becomes blurred. This integration is not accidental. It reflects a deliberate strategy to use the landscape as both foundation and defense, while imposing a layer of human order upon it. Beyond the technical aspects, the precision of the walls also carries symbolic weight. In ancient societies, the act of building was often tied to expressions of power, control, and permanence. A wall that is perfectly aligned and tightly fitted does more than resist physical forces. It communicates authority. It tells both inhabitants and outsiders that the builders possessed not only the resources to construct such a structure, but also the knowledge to do so with mastery. No, in this sense, the geometry of Tushpa is not merely functional. It is ideological. It reflects a worldview in which order can be imposed upon chaos, and in which the stability of the state is mirrored in the stability of its architecture. Archaeological investigations at the site have uncovered inscriptions carved into the rock faces near the fortress, many of them attributed to Urartian kings such as Sarduri I. These inscriptions, written in cuneiform script, commemorate the construction of the city and assert royal authority over the region. While they provide valuable historical context, they offer little insight into the practical methods used to achieve the remarkable precision seen in the walls. This absence of direct explanation only deepens the mystery. The stones themselves become the primary source of information, and their surfaces and joints preserving clues that must be interpreted through careful observation and comparison. When compared to other ancient stone constructions, Tushpa occupies a unique position. It does not rely on the massive, irregular polygonal blocks seen in some Mediterranean sites, nor does it follow the strictly uniform courses of later classical architecture. Instead, it represents a hybrid approach, one that combines adaptability to terrain with a commitment to geometric clarity. This balance may be the key to its longevity. The tight joints reduce movement between stones, increasing structural stability, while the careful placement of each block ensures that weight is distributed evenly across the wall. Over centuries of seismic activity, weathering, and human interference, and these qualities have allowed the core of the structure to endure. And yet, for all that has been learned, the central question remains unresolved. How did a civilization operating more than 2,700 years ago achieve such a high level of precision in such a challenging environment? Was it the result of incremental experimentation, knowledge passed down through generations of builders refining their craft? Or does it point to a level of technological sophistication that has yet to be fully recognized in the archaeological record? The answers may lie in details too subtle to be immediately apparent, in tool marks, in patterns of wear, in the microscopic characteristics of the stone's surfaces. Today, the ruins of Van Tushpa walls continue to overlook Lake Van, and their weathered forms still echoing the intentions of their creators. The mud brick structures that once crowned the stone foundations have largely disappeared, but the precision of the masonry endures, defying time and inviting inquiry. For modern observers, the site is more than a historical landmark. It is a puzzle. Each carefully fitted stone is a fragment of a larger story, one that speaks of human ingenuity, persistence, and the enduring desire to shape the world with both strength and precision. In your opinion, how did the Eurasians achieve such near-perfect geometric precision when constructing these walls? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Rising above the dense urban fabric of northern Syria, the citadel of Aleppo stands as one of the oldest continuously occupied strongholds in human history, its massive form dominating the skyline like a relic suspended between epochs. At its heart lies the inner keep, a structure not merely architectural but almost geological in nature, embedded within a vast artificial mound formed by millennia of human activity. This central core represents the culmination of countless phases of construction, destruction, and reinvention, making it less a single building and more a layered archive of civilizations, each imprinting its own logic, technology, and purpose onto the same elevated ground. The result is a complex that defies simple classification, existing simultaneously as fortress, residence, sanctuary, and enigma. From a structural perspective, the inner keep functions as a fortress within a fortress, a final defensive redoubt designed to remain operational even after the outer walls had fallen. Yet its design reveals something far more intricate than brute military pragmatism. The internal layout is deliberately disorienting, composed of narrow corridors, abrupt turns, vertical transitions, and enclosed chambers that fragment movement and visibility. There is no single, clear axis through the structure. Instead, pathways bend unpredictably, forcing any intruder into a constant state of uncertainty. This spatial manipulation transforms the architecture itself into a defensive weapon, where confusion and exposure become as lethal as swords or arrows. The geometry is not decorative, but strategic, suggesting a deep understanding of human perception under stress and an ability to translate that understanding into stone. Equally striking is the precision with which this system is executed. The angles of corridors, the placement of openings, and the positioning of elevated vantage points all appear calibrated to maximize defensive advantage. Attackers would be funneled into narrow choke points, exposed from above, and denied any opportunity to build momentum. There are no long, straight passages that allow for rapid advancement. Instead, every turn becomes a potential trap. This level of spatial control implies a sophisticated grasp of geometry and tactical planning that challenges conventional assumptions about medieval engineering capabilities. It suggests that the builders were not merely constructing walls, but orchestrating movement, designing an environment where every step taken by an enemy would be anticipated and countered. The materials themselves add another layer of complexity to the mystery. Constructed primarily from large limestone blocks, the inner keep exhibits a durability that has allowed it to withstand centuries of warfare, environmental erosion, and seismic activity. Many of the stones remain tightly fitted, their joints so precise that even today they resist the intrusion of time. There is little evidence of advanced binding agents, raising questions about the techniques used to achieve such stability. In some areas, stones appear to have been repurposed from earlier structures, hinting at an ongoing process of adaptation and reuse. This blending of materials from different periods contributes to the sense that the inner keep is not a static creation, but an evolving organism, constantly reshaped by those who occupied it. Beneath and within this stone labyrinth lies another critical component of its resilience, a carefully engineered system of water management and resource storage. Deep wells penetrate the accumulated layers of the mound, reaching down through centuries of debris and construction to access reliable water sources. Alongside these are cisterns designed to collect and store rainwater, ensuring that the inhabitants could endure prolonged sieges without relying on external supply lines. The presence of such infrastructure underscores the strategic foresight embedded in the design, and transforming the inner keep into a self-sustaining environment capable of surviving isolation. Yet the sheer depth and precision of these wells raise further questions about the tools and methods employed, especially given the technological constraints of the periods involved. Perhaps the most fascinating aspect of the inner keep, however, is the visible evidence of multiple civilizations layered within its fabric. The masonry styles shift subtly from one section to another, revealing the hands of different builders across time. Hellenistic, Byzantine, Islamic, and possibly even earlier influences, now obscured by later modifications. Walls intersect at unexpected angles. Foundations do not always align perfectly, and certain chambers seem to belong to entirely different architectural logics. This patchwork of styles creates a structure that is both unified and fragmented, coherent in function, yet diverse in origin. It is as if each generation inherited a partially understood system and adapted it according to its own needs, without fully erasing what came before. And it is within this layered complexity that the greatest mystery emerges. What was the original purpose of the inner keep? While its later use as a military stronghold is well documented, there are compelling indications that its earliest incarnation may have served a very different function. Certain internal spaces do not conform to typical defensive architecture. They are too enclosed, too symmetrical, or too isolated from strategic vantage points to be purely military. Some chambers suggest ceremonial or administrative use, and while others hint at residential or even sacred functions. The very location, atop a mound built up over thousands of years, implies that this site held significance long before it became a fortress. One possibility is that the inner keep originated as a central seat of power, a place where authority was concentrated not only politically but symbolically. Elevated above the surrounding landscape, it would have been visible from great distances, reinforcing its role as a focal point of control and identity. Over time, as the region faced increasing threats, this symbolic center may have been transformed into a fortified stronghold, its original purpose gradually obscured by layers of defensive adaptation. Another hypothesis suggests that the site may have had ritual or religious significance in its earliest phases, and with later builders incorporating and repurposing these sacred spaces into a military framework. This would explain the presence of architectural elements that seem out of place in a purely defensive context. What makes this question particularly difficult to answer is the very nature of the structure itself. The continuous occupation and reconstruction of the citadel mean that earlier layers have been partially destroyed, modified, or buried beneath subsequent developments. Archaeological evidence is fragmented, and interpretations often rely on indirect clues rather than definitive proof. The inner keep, therefore, resists any single narrative, existing instead as a palimpsest of intentions, where each layer both reveals and conceals the one beneath it. In this sense, and the mystery of the inner keep is not just about its physical structure, but about the continuity of human presence and adaptation. It embodies the transition from ancient settlement to fortified city, from symbolic center to military bastion, reflecting broader shifts in how societies organize space, power, and survival. Its walls do not simply defend, they remember, encoding within their stones the accumulated decisions of countless generations. Today, as the citadel of Aleppo endures the scars of modern conflict, the inner keep remains at its core, a silent witness to thousands of years of history, still withholding the full truth of its origins. Was it always intended as a fortress, or did it begin as something far more complex, a center of ritual, governance, or identity that was later transformed by necessity? The answer may lie hidden within the very layers that make the structure so enduring, waiting to be uncovered by those willing to look beyond its walls and into the deeper logic of its design. What do you think the inner keep of Citadel of Aleppo was originally built for? A military fortress or an ancient center of ritual and power? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Perched high above the rugged valleys of northern Iran, the fortress of Alamut rises like a fragment of the mountain itself, sharp, isolated, and almost unreal. Known historically as the Eagle's Nest, this legendary stronghold was more than a military installation. It was a carefully engineered symbol of dominance, secrecy, and psychological control. At an elevation exceeding 2,000 meters within the Alborz mountain range, Alamut appears less like a human construction and more like a natural extension of the cliffs that surround it. Yet behind this illusion lies one of the most remarkable examples of strategic placement in ancient and medieval architecture, a location so precise and unforgiving that it continues to challenge modern understanding of how and why it was built. The most striking and arguably most important feature of Alamut is its position, an architectural decision that transformed geography into an impenetrable defense system. The fortress occupies a narrow ridge that stretches like a blade along the mountain's spine, with sheer drops plunging hundreds of meters on nearly all sides. From a distance, the cliffs appear smooth and vertical, offering no foothold for climbers and no viable approach for an attacking army. Unlike traditional fortifications that rely on thick walls and defensive towers, Alamut's primary protection was the mountain itself. Its builders did not merely construct a fortress on a high place. They selected a location where nature had already completed most of the defensive work. In doing so, they created a stronghold that could not be easily surrounded, besieged, or even reached in significant numbers. Access to the fortress was limited to a single, narrow pathway that wound its way up the mountainside in a series of tight turns and steep inclines. This path was not simply difficult, it was deliberately engineered to exhaust, expose, and disorient any who attempted to ascend it. Attackers would have been forced to advance in small groups, unable to deploy large formations or siege equipment, all while remaining vulnerable to defenders positioned above. From the fortress walls, even a handful of defenders could control the entire approach, raining down projectiles or triggering rockfalls with devastating effect. In this way, Alamut exemplifies a principle rarely seen at such an extreme level: the complete integration of terrain into military strategy, where the environment itself becomes the most powerful weapon. Yet this raises an enduring and deeply puzzling question. How did the builders of Alamut, working centuries before modern engineering tools, identify, access, and ultimately transform such an inhospitable location into a functioning fortress? The ridge is not only steep, but also narrow and irregular, offering limited space for construction. Transporting building materials to such a height would have required extraordinary coordination, ingenuity, and physical endurance. There is no evidence of large-scale machinery or advanced lifting systems, and yet the fortress was not a simple outpost. It included living quarters, storage areas, defensive structures, and complex internal layouts, all carefully adapted to the constraints of the terrain. The precision with which these elements were arranged suggests not improvisation, but a deliberate and highly sophisticated design process. Equally remarkable is how the fortress maximized its limited space. Every section of the ridge appears to have been utilized with purpose, from terraced platforms carved into the rock to structures that align perfectly with the natural contours of the mountain. This level of spatial efficiency indicates a deep understanding of both architecture and topography, as well as the ability to plan construction in 3 dimensions, long before such concepts were formally documented. The builders did not attempt to reshape the mountain to suit their needs. Instead, they adapted their designs to fit the mountain exactly, and achieving a balance between human intention and natural form that feels almost seamless. The strategic brilliance of Alamut's location becomes even more apparent when considered in the broader context of medieval warfare. Most fortresses, no matter how well fortified, could eventually be overcome through prolonged siege, superior numbers, or advanced siege technology. Alamut, however, resisted these conventional approaches. Its height and isolation made it extremely difficult to cut off completely, while its defensive advantages minimized the effectiveness of traditional assault tactics. In many ways, it represents a different philosophy of defense, one that prioritizes inaccessibility over fortification and precision over scale. Rather than building higher walls, its creators chose a place where walls were almost unnecessary. Beyond its physical defenses, the location of Alamut also contributed to its psychological power. The mere sight of the fortress, perched impossibly atop a jagged peak, would have conveyed a sense of invulnerability and absolute control. For allies, it symbolized safety and strength. For enemies, it represented an unreachable and ever-present threat. This psychological dimension was crucial, particularly during the period when Alamut served as the headquarters of the Nizari Ismailis under Hassan Isaba. From this isolated stronghold, a network of influence extended across the region, demonstrating that true power did not always depend on territorial expansion, but could instead be concentrated and projected from a single, strategically chosen point in the landscape. Despite its apparent invincibility, the fortress was not entirely self-sufficient, and this introduces another layer of complexity to its design. Maintaining a permanent population at such an altitude would have required reliable access to food, water, and other essential resources. Archaeological evidence suggests that the inhabitants developed sophisticated systems for water collection and storage, as well as agricultural terraces in the surrounding areas. These adaptations further highlight the ingenuity of those who occupied Alamut, transforming a seemingly inhospitable environment into a sustainable base of operations. Yet even with these innovations, the question remains: how did they manage the logistical challenges of supplying and maintaining such a remote and elevated fortress over extended periods? The eventual fall of Alamut in the 13th century adds yet another dimension to its mystery. Conquered by the Mongol forces of Hulagu Khan, the fortress did not fall through direct assault in the conventional sense. Instead, historical accounts suggest a combination of strategic pressure, negotiation, and possibly internal factors that led to its surrender. This outcome is striking, given the fortress's extraordinary defensive advantages. It suggests that even the most perfectly positioned stronghold is not immune to the complexities of human decision-making, political dynamics, and psychological pressure. In a sense, the same isolation that made Alamut so powerful may also have contributed to its vulnerability, limiting its ability to adapt to rapidly changing circumstances. Today, the ruins of Alamut remain as silent witnesses to this remarkable fusion of nature and human ambition. Weathered stones cling to the ridge where walls once stood, and the narrow path still traces its way up the mountainside, offering a glimpse into the experience of those who once approached the fortress. Yet much of its original structure has been lost, and with it, many of the answers to the questions it continues to raise. What survives is not just a physical site, but a concept, a demonstration of how geography, strategy, and vision can converge to create something that feels almost beyond the limits of its time. In the end, the true mystery of the cliffside fortress of Alamut may not lie in any single feature, but in the extraordinary coherence of its design. Every aspect of the fortress, and from its placement on the ridge to the layout of its internal spaces, reflects a level of planning and foresight that challenges conventional assumptions about medieval engineering and strategy. It is not merely a fortress built on a mountain, it is a fortress that becomes the mountain, an extension of the landscape shaped by human intent. And perhaps the most enduring question it leaves behind is this: was Alamut simply the product of exceptional ingenuity, or does it represent a level of strategic thinking that we have yet to fully understand? Perched high above the rugged landscape of the Golan Heights, the ancient city of Gamla stands as a silent witness to both human resilience and engineering ingenuity. Often referred to as the Masada of the North, Gamla is best known for its dramatic last stand against the Roman Empire in the 1st century CE. Yet beyond its historical significance, what truly sets this site apart is the material from which it was built. Unlike many ancient cities that relied on relatively workable stone, such as limestone or sandstone, Gamla was constructed almost entirely from basalt, a dense, volcanic rock formed through intense geological processes. This choice alone transforms Gamla from a simple archaeological site into a profound mystery of ancient engineering. And why would a civilization choose one of the hardest and most unforgiving materials available to build its primary defensive structures? And more importantly, how did they manage to shape, transport, and assemble it with such precision? At first glance, basalt might seem like an impractical choice for construction. Formed from rapidly cooling lava, it is exceptionally hard, heavy, and resistant to weathering. Unlike softer stones, basalt does not yield easily to chisels or primitive cutting tools. Its internal structure is dense and often irregular, making it difficult to split cleanly into uniform blocks. In many ancient cultures, builders deliberately avoided such materials in favor of stones that could be more easily shaped and aligned. Yet at Gamla, and basalt was not only used, it was embraced as the primary building material for its defensive walls. This decision raises immediate questions. Working basalt requires immense effort, advanced knowledge of stone fracture behavior, and tools capable of withstanding prolonged contact with a highly abrasive surface. The sheer labor involved in quarrying basalt alone would have been monumental. Extracting large blocks from volcanic bedrock without modern machinery suggests a deep understanding of natural fault lines, thermal stress techniques, or other methods that remain poorly documented. Each block would then need to be transported across uneven terrain, an equally daunting task given the weight of the material. But perhaps the most astonishing aspect lies not in the extraction or transport, but in the shaping. Despite its resistance, the basalt stones of Gamla were cut and fitted with remarkable care. Their surfaces, though not perfectly smooth, were refined enough to allow tight connections between adjacent blocks. This level of craftsmanship implies not only patience, but also a sophisticated approach to stoneworking, one that challenges conventional assumptions about the technological limits of ancient societies in the region. Even more intriguing is how these basalt blocks were assembled. The defensive walls of Gamla were constructed using a dry stone technique, meaning no mortar was used to bind the stones together. Instead, the builders relied entirely on the precision of the stone shapes and the careful placement of each block. In many sections of the wall, the stones fit so tightly that the gaps between them are nearly invisible. This method requires an extraordinary level of planning and execution, especially when dealing with a material as uncooperative as basalt. Unlike polygonal masonry seen in other parts of the world, the stones at Gamla often retain irregular forms, yet still interlock in a stable and cohesive structure. This suggests that the builders were not merely shaping stones to fit a predefined pattern, but rather adapting each piece individually, responding to its natural geometry. Such an approach would demand a high degree of spatial awareness and real-time problem-solving, as each stone had to be positioned in relation to all surrounding elements. The absence of mortar also means that the structural integrity of the wall depends entirely on gravity, friction, and balance. This makes the durability of the Gamla walls even more impressive. Despite centuries of exposure to environmental forces and the destructive impact of a Roman siege, significant portions of these basalt defenses remain standing today. Gamla's location plays a crucial role in understanding its defensive system. Built along a narrow ridge with steep cliffs on three sides, the city required minimal artificial fortification in certain areas. The natural topography acted as a formidable barrier, allowing the builders to concentrate their efforts on reinforcing only the most vulnerable points of access. Here again, basalt walls were strategically placed to complement the terrain, creating a layered defense that combined natural and human-made elements. This integration of environment and architecture reflects a sophisticated understanding of military strategy. Rather than imposing a rigid geometric plan onto the landscape, the builders of Gamla adapted their design to the contours of the ridge. The result is a fortress that feels almost organic, an extension of the mountain itself. The dark basalt stones, blending seamlessly with the surrounding rock, further enhance this effect, making the walls difficult to distinguish from the natural environment at a distance. The true strength of Gamla's basalt walls was put to the test during the Roman siege of 67 CE. Historical accounts describe a prolonged and intense assault, during which Roman forces struggled to breach the city's defenses. The hardness and density of basalt made traditional siege tactics less effective, as battering rams and other tools were primarily designed for softer materials. Eventually, the Romans succeeded, but not without significant difficulty. Archaeological evidence suggests that part of the wall may have collapsed due to structural stress or a targeted attack, creating a point of entry. Even so, the resistance offered by the basalt defenses delayed the invasion and contributed to the dramatic final moments of the city's history. The fact that these walls could withstand such an assault speaks volumes about their construction quality and the strategic foresight of their builders. Despite extensive archaeological research, many questions about Gamla remain unanswered. Chief among them is the issue of technological capability. How did the builders acquire the skills necessary to work with basalt so effectively? What tools did they use, and how were these tools maintained? Was this knowledge unique to Gamla, and or part of a broader, now lost tradition of stoneworking in the region? The absence of detailed records forces researchers to rely solely on physical evidence. Each stone, each joint, each remaining fragment of the wall becomes a clue in a much larger puzzle, one that may never be fully solved. What is clear, however, is that the builders of Gamla possessed a level of technical skill and adaptability that challenges modern assumptions about the limits of ancient engineering. The basalt defensive walls of Gamla are more than just remnants of an ancient city. They are a testament to human ingenuity in the face of natural limitations. By choosing a material that was difficult to work with, but exceptionally durable, the builders created a fortress capable of resisting both time and invasion. This decision, and seemingly impractical at first, ultimately became the defining feature of Gamla's strength and mystery. In the end, Gamla forces us to reconsider what ancient societies were capable of achieving. It reminds us that innovation does not always come from convenience, but often from the willingness to confront and overcome challenges. And perhaps most intriguingly, it leaves us with a lingering question. What other knowledge, once mastered by ancient builders, has been lost to history, waiting to be rediscovered in stone? Do you think ancient builders truly mastered basalt working techniques beyond our current understanding, or are we still missing a major piece of the puzzle? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Across the forested landscapes of northern Japan, in what is now Akita Prefecture, lies one of the most enigmatic prehistoric sites in East Asia, the Oyu Stone Circles. At first glance, the site appears deceptively simple. Two large circular arrangements of river stones resting quietly on the ground. Yet beneath this simplicity lies a profound mystery that challenges long-standing assumptions about the capabilities of the Jomon people, a culture traditionally viewed as hunter-gatherers with limited technology. Dating back roughly 4,000 years, the Oyu Stone Circles consist primarily of two major formations known as Manza and Nonakado, each measuring approximately 40 to 50 meters in diameter and composed of thousands of stones transported from nearby riverbeds. Yet the sheer scale of the construction immediately raises a critical question. How could a society without metal tools or advanced machinery organize, transport, and arrange such an enormous volume of material with such precision and clear intent? The mystery deepens when not only the scale, but also the extraordinary geometric precision of the site is examined, arguably its most striking and least understood feature. These stone circles are not random accumulations, nor are they roughly formed shapes created by approximation. Instead, the Oyu Stone Circles display a level of spatial organization that indicates deliberate planning, measurement, and execution. The circles are remarkably symmetrical, with clearly defined centers and consistent radii, suggesting a sophisticated understanding of distance and proportion. Now, even more compelling are the radial arrangements, lines of stones extending outward or intersecting the circles at specific angles, implying that the builders were not merely enclosing space, but encoding directional or relational information into the layout itself. For a culture without written mathematics, metal tools, or known surveying instruments, this level of geometric control presents a significant puzzle. At this point, OU stands apart from many other prehistoric sites. It is not just a physical structure, but something closer to a spatial blueprint, executed with astonishing precision, as if its builders possessed a system of geometric principles that we have yet to fully reconstruct. This leads inevitably to the question of what methods were used to achieve such precision. Some researchers suggest that the Jomon people may have used ropes or cords anchored at a central point to trace perfect circles, a conceptually simple technique that nonetheless requires consistency and coordination on a large scale. Others propose the use of wooden stakes and repeated measurement through pacing or standardized units based on the human body. However, while plausible, these ideas remain speculative. There is no direct archaeological evidence of the tools or procedures used to construct the circles, leaving a gap between what we observe and how it was accomplished. It is within this gap that the mystery truly resides. The precision is undeniable and measurable, yet the process behind it has disappeared without a trace, as if the knowledge was never recorded or has been entirely lost over time. The complexity increases further with the possibility that the geometric layout was not purely aesthetic or structural, but symbolic or even astronomical in nature. Some alignments within the stone circles appear to correspond loosely with solar events, such as the position of the sunrise during the summer solstice or the sunset during the winter solstice. If intentional, this would suggest that the builders possessed not only geometric awareness, but also a systematic observation of celestial cycles. However, the evidence remains inconclusive. Some alignments match these patterns, while others do not, leaving open the possibility that these astronomical correlations are coincidental or secondary to an unknown purpose. Nevertheless, the combination of geometry and possible celestial orientation points to a worldview in which space, direction, and time were deeply interconnected, where arranging stones was not merely a physical act, but a way of engaging with the cosmos. Excavations at the site have uncovered additional clues, though none provide a definitive answer. Archaeologists have discovered burial pits, fragments of Jomon pottery, and small figurines known as dog, which are often associated with ritual or spiritual practices. These findings support the idea that Oyu may have functioned as a ceremonial or sacred space, possibly linked to seasonal gatherings or funerary rites. Yet this interpretation introduces another layer of mystery. Why would a ritual site require such strict geometric precision? In many cultures, sacred spaces are structured and symbolic, but the level of mathematical consistency seen at OU seems to go beyond what would be necessary for purely ceremonial purposes. This suggests that the act of construction itself, its order, symmetry, and alignment, may have held meaning beyond the visible, functioning almost as a ritual in its own right, with geometry at its core. Another equally compelling question concerns logistics and social organization. The stones used in the circles were not sourced locally, but collected from riverbeds several kilometers away. Transporting thousands of stones over such distances would have required coordinated labor, planning, and a shared objective strong enough to mobilize an entire community over an extended period. This implies a level of social complexity not always attributed to Jomon societies. It suggests that the builders of Oyu operated within a structured system of cooperation, possibly guided by leaders, specialists, or shared cosmological beliefs that justified the immense effort involved. In this sense, the stone circles are not only a physical construction, but also a reflection of an invisible social framework, a system of belief and organization powerful enough to transform an idea into reality. Ultimately, the Oyu stone circles force us to reconsider what we mean by primitive. The traditional narrative of technological progress often assumes a linear trajectory, in which early societies lacked the knowledge or capability to produce complex and precise constructions. Yet here, in the quiet forests of Akita, there stands a monument that challenges that assumption. Its geometry is intentional, its scale is impressive, and its purpose remains elusive. Whether it served as a solar calendar, a ceremonial ground, a burial site, or something entirely different, one fact remains clear. The people who built it possessed a level of understanding of space, structure, and perhaps even the cosmos that we still do not fully comprehend. And so, the circles endure, silent and unchanged, inviting each new generation to look closer, measure again, and ask the same unanswered question: how did they achieve such precision? And more importantly, why? What do you think truly lies behind the astonishing geometric precision of the Oyu stone circles? Simple, yet refined techniques, or an ancient knowledge we still don't fully understand? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The Teldan Gate complex, located within Teldan National Park, stands today as one of the most quietly astonishing archaeological discoveries in the ancient Near East. At first glance, it does not possess the overwhelming scale of monumental temples or the imposing grandeur of stone fortresses. Instead, its power lies in something far more unsettling to modern understanding. It is a structure made from one of the weakest building materials imaginable, sun-dried mud bricks, yet it has endured for nearly 4,000 years. This paradox alone transforms the Teldan Gate from a simple city entrance into a profound mystery of ancient engineering, preservation, and lost knowledge. Dating back to approximately the 18th century BCE, the gate is often associated with the era traditionally linked to Abraham, and which is why it is sometimes referred to as the Abraham Gate. While no direct archaeological evidence confirms that Abraham himself ever passed through this structure, the chronological overlap adds a layer of historical intrigue that blends the boundaries between documented history and enduring tradition. Yet even without this association, the gate remains extraordinary for reasons that are far more tangible and far more difficult to explain. The most striking aspect of the Teldan Gate complex is not merely its age, but the material from which it was constructed. Unlike the massive stone blocks used in Egyptian pyramids or Mesopotamian ziggurats, this gate is composed almost entirely of mud bricks, simple mixtures of earth, water, and organic temper, such as straw, shaped and left to dry under the sun. In nearly every known environment, such materials are highly vulnerable. Rain erodes them, wind gradually strips away their surfaces, and fluctuations in temperature cause cracking and structural weakness. In most cases, mud brick architecture requires constant maintenance. Without it, structures deteriorate within decades, sometimes even years. And yet, at Teldan, the opposite seems to have occurred. The gate has not only survived, it has retained its fundamental form, including its curved arches, layered construction, and recognizable brick composition. Even after millennia of exposure to natural processes, the structure remains sufficiently intact for archaeologists to study its design in detail. This raises an unavoidable question. How can a material so inherently fragile resist time on such a scale? No, one possible explanation lies in the composition of the mud itself. Ancient builders may have possessed a far more refined understanding of soil chemistry than previously assumed. The ratio of clay to silt, the inclusion of organic fibers, and the compaction techniques used during construction could have produced bricks with significantly enhanced durability. If the clay content was particularly high, for example, it would have increased cohesion and resistance to erosion. The addition of straw or other plant material might have acted as a form of natural reinforcement, reducing cracking as the bricks dried and aged. However, while these factors can improve durability, they alone do not fully account for preservation over nearly 4,000 years. Another factor may be environmental. The regions surrounding Tel Dan, while not entirely arid, experiences seasonal conditions that may have limited prolonged exposure to destructive moisture. Over time, layers of sediment gradually accumulated around the structure, effectively burying it. This unintentional burial may have created a stable microenvironment, shielding the bricks from direct rainfall, temperature extremes, and wind erosion. In essence, the gate may have been sealed within a natural protective shell, preserving it in a state that would have been impossible if it had remained fully exposed. Yet even this explanation introduces further complexity. Burial alone does not guarantee preservation, especially for mud brick. Pressure from overlying soil can deform structures, and groundwater infiltration can accelerate decay. The fact that the Tel Dan gate retained its arch form, one of the most structurally sensitive configurations, suggests that the original construction was exceptionally precise. The distribution of weight across the arch must have been calculated, whether intuitively or through accumulated empirical knowledge, to prevent collapse even under changing environmental conditions. This leads to another layer of mystery: the apparent sophistication of the construction technique. The gate features a true arch, composed of wedge-shaped bricks arranged to distribute load outward and downward. This is not a simple stacking of materials, but a deliberate engineering solution requiring an understanding of forces and balance. In later historical periods, such knowledge became widespread, particularly in Roman architecture. But in the early 2nd millennium BCE, evidence of such advanced use of arches is rare. The presence of this design at Tel Dan suggests that the builders possessed architectural insights that either developed independently or were part of a tradition that has largely been lost. What makes this even more puzzling is the apparent discontinuity of this knowledge. If such effective techniques for both construction and material durability existed, why do we not see a continuous evolution of similar methods in neighboring regions? Why do many later structures revert to less efficient or less durable forms? It is as if the knowledge embodied in the Tel Dan gate represents a localized peak, an isolated moment of innovation that was never fully transmitted or preserved. The idea of lost knowledge is not new in archaeology, but the Tel Dan gate provides a particularly compelling case. Here, the mystery is not hidden beneath layers of myth or speculation. It is visible in the physical reality of the structure itself. Every surviving brick, every curve of the arch, challenges modern assumptions about what ancient builders could achieve with limited resources. It suggests that technological advancement is not always linear, that capabilities can emerge, flourish, and disappear without leaving a clear trace in the historical record. At the same time, the gate serves as a reminder of how much context has been lost. We do not know the identities of the builders, the specific methods they used to select and prepare materials, or the cultural significance the structure may have held. Was it merely a functional entrance to a fortified city, or did it carry symbolic meaning, perhaps representing authority, protection, or transition? The scale and effort invested in its construction imply that it was more than a simple passageway. Today, as visitors stand before the remains of the Tel Dan Gate complex, they are confronted not with a ruin in the conventional sense, but with a question frozen in time. How did a civilization, working with materials that should have crumbled long ago, create something that continues to endure? And perhaps more importantly, what does this reveal about the limits of our current understanding of ancient technology? The Tel Dan Gate does not provide clear answers. Instead, it offers a rare and tangible paradox, a structure built from weakness that has achieved extraordinary strength through time. And in that contradiction lies its true significance, not only as an archaeological site, but as a challenge to the narrative of progress itself. If a structure made of mud bricks can survive for nearly 4,000 years, have we underestimated the knowledge and engineering skills of ancient civilizations? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The Palace of Sarvastan dome structure stands as one of the most intriguing architectural remnants of the Sasanian Empire, a silent monument rising from the arid plains of southern Iran that continues to challenge modern understanding of ancient engineering. At first glance, the structure appears modest compared to the monumental complexes of other ancient civilizations, yet a closer examination reveals a level of sophistication that feels strikingly out of place for its time. Built around the 5th century CE, Sarvastan is often described as a palace, but its true purpose remains uncertain, adding a layer of mystery that deepens its significance. What truly elevates this site beyond a mere historical curiosity is not just its design, but the remarkable technical mastery embedded within its construction, and particularly in the durability of its materials, an aspect that continues to puzzle engineers and archaeologists alike. The architectural layout of Sarvastan reflects a carefully considered balance between form and function. The central dome, supported without the use of massive internal columns, demonstrates a deep understanding of weight distribution and structural integrity. The transition from a square base to a circular dome, achieved through the use of squinches, represents a key innovation in architectural history. This technique, later refined and widely adopted in Islamic and Byzantine architecture, appears here in an early and surprisingly mature form. It suggests that the builders of Sarvastan possessed not only practical construction skills, but also an advanced conceptual grasp of geometry and spatial transformation. Such knowledge, in the absence of modern mathematical tools, raises fundamental questions about how these ancient engineers calculated stress, curvature, and balance with such precision. Yet beyond its geometric ingenuity and structural elegance, the most enduring mystery of Sarvastan lies in its physical resilience. The materials used in its construction have withstood more than a millennium of environmental stress, including extreme temperature fluctuations, seasonal winds, and the slow erosion of time itself. Unlike many ancient structures that have crumbled into near unrecognizable ruins, significant portions of Sarvastan remain intact, preserving not only their form, but also their internal cohesion. This is particularly remarkable given the apparent simplicity of the materials, primarily baked bricks bonded with a form of mortar whose exact composition remains only partially understood. Modern analysis suggests that the mortar used in Sarvastan may have contained a carefully balanced mixture of lime, clay, and possibly organic additives, creating a binding agent with exceptional adhesive and elastic properties. This combination would have allowed the structure to absorb minor shifts in the ground and resist cracking under thermal expansion, a critical feature in a desert environment where temperatures can vary dramatically between day and night. The bricks themselves appear to have been fired at temperatures that optimized both hardness and porosity, and enabling them to maintain structural strength while also allowing minimal moisture exchange. This delicate balance may be one of the key reasons the structure has survived for so long without significant degradation. What makes this even more compelling is the apparent consistency of these materials across different sections of the building. This was not an isolated experiment or a fortunate accident. It was a repeatable, controlled process. The builders of Sarvastan were not merely constructing a single structure. They were applying a standardized material technology that suggests a broader tradition of knowledge. And yet, this knowledge does not appear to have been widely documented or preserved in a way that survived into later periods. The techniques that allowed Sarvastan to endure seem to have faded, and leaving behind only the structure itself as evidence of their existence. The durability of Sarvastan also forces a reconsideration of how we define technological advancement in ancient societies. It is often assumed that modern materials such as reinforced concrete represent the pinnacle of construction durability, yet Sarvastan challenges this assumption. Despite lacking steel reinforcement or synthetic compounds, the building has achieved a longevity that rivals or even exceeds many modern structures. This raises an uncomfortable question. Have certain ancient construction techniques been lost, not because they were inferior, but because they were never fully understood or valued by subsequent generations? Equally puzzling is the context in which such a durable structure was built. Sarvastan is located far from the major urban centers of the Sasanian Empire, in a region that would have required significant logistical effort to support large-scale construction. Transporting materials, organizing labor, and maintaining a stable supply chain in such an environment would have been no small feat. This suggests that the site held considerable importance, yet the absence of clear historical records leaves its purpose open to interpretation. Was it a royal residence, designed to withstand the harsh conditions of a remote landscape? A ceremonial space, built with enduring materials to reflect spiritual permanence? Or perhaps something else entirely, a function that no longer fits within our current frameworks of understanding? Comparisons with other Sasanian structures further highlight the uniqueness of Sarvastan. While domes and vaulted spaces are not uncommon in Persian architecture, the combination of structural innovation and material resilience seen here is particularly refined. In many other sites, time has taken a heavier toll, leaving behind fragmented walls and collapsed roofs. Sarvastan, by contrast, retains a sense of completeness that allows modern observers to experience its spatial design in a way that is rarely possible with ruins of similar age. This preservation is not merely a matter of chance, it is a direct consequence of the choices made by its builders, from the selection of materials to the methods of construction. As archaeological investigations continue, new technologies such as material spectroscopy and structural analysis may provide further insights into the composition and behavior of Sarvastan's building materials. However, even with these tools, there remains a gap between understanding the components of the materials and fully replicating their performance. The exact conditions under which the mortar was mixed, the firing techniques used for the bricks, and the construction practices that ensured uniformity across the structure are all variables that are difficult to reconstruct with certainty. In this sense, Sarvastan is not just a relic of the past. It is a puzzle, a record of knowledge encoded in physical form rather than written text. Ultimately, the Palace of Sarvastan dome structure stands as a powerful reminder that ancient engineering was not always primitive or limited. On the contrary, it could achieve levels of efficiency, durability, and elegance that continue to challenge modern assumptions. The building's enduring strength is not merely a testament to the passage of time, but to the sophistication of the people who created it. And perhaps the greatest mystery of all is not how Sarvastan was built, but why the knowledge behind it was not carried forward. What other techniques, materials, or principles might have been lost in the centuries that followed, leaving us with only fragments, silent structures like Sarvastan, that hint at a deeper, largely forgotten understanding of the built world? Do you think the incredible durability of Sarvastan's materials comes from lost ancient knowledge, or is it something we still don't fully understand today? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Anundshög stone ship stands quietly in the Swedish landscape, a vast and enigmatic reminder of a world where belief, engineering, and symbolism were deeply intertwined. At first glance, it appears deceptively simple, a formation of large stones arranged in the unmistakable outline of a ship, resting on open ground beneath an expansive northern sky. Yet the more closely one examines this ancient structure, the more it reveals itself as something far more complex, a deliberate construction shaped by intention, precision, and knowledge that still challenges modern understanding. Situated within one of Scandinavia's largest ancient burial sites, alongside the massive Anundshög mound, the stone ship is not an isolated monument, but part of a broader ceremonial landscape that suggests social hierarchy, ritual importance, and a sophisticated worldview tied to both the earth and the cosmos. The stone ship itself stretches roughly 50 to 60 meters in length, its elongated form defined by carefully positioned standing stones that mark the outline of a vessel. The bow and stern are clearly distinguished, rising slightly higher than the stones along the sides, giving the entire formation a sense of direction, as if it were meant to travel, even while fixed permanently in place. In Viking and pre-Viking belief systems, ships were not merely tools of exploration or warfare, they were sacred symbols, deeply connected to the journey of the soul after death. The dead were often imagined as voyagers, departing from the realm of the living toward an unknown destination beyond the horizon. In this context, the stone ship at Anundshög may represent a metaphysical vessel, a symbolic means of transport between worlds. However, unlike traditional burial ships where remains are found within or beneath the structure, many stone ships, including this one, do not consistently contain human remains. This inconsistency introduces a layer of ambiguity. Was the structure intended as a literal burial site, or was it instead a ceremonial construct, designed to enact rituals rather than to house the dead? What elevates the mystery of the Anundshög stone ship beyond symbolism is its remarkable geometric precision, an aspect that continues to provoke debate among archaeologists, historians, and researchers. Despite being constructed more than a millennium ago, the arrangement of stones demonstrates a level of symmetry that appears almost deliberate to the point of calculation. The long axis of the ship is straight and balanced, with the stones on either side mirroring each other in spacing and alignment. The endpoints, representing the bow and stern, are positioned with striking accuracy, forming a coherent and proportionate outline that can only be fully appreciated when viewed from above. This is not a random or loosely organized structure. It is a carefully planned geometric form, executed with consistency across its entire length. Each stone contributes to an overall design that maintains visual and spatial harmony, suggesting that the builders were working according to a predefined plan, rather than improvisation. The question that naturally arises is how such precision was achieved. The people who constructed the stone ship had no access to modern surveying tools, no metal measuring tapes, no aerial perspective from which to oversee their work. And yet, the final result exhibits a level of alignment that implies not only practical skill, but also an understanding of geometry and spatial relationships. One possibility is that the builders relied on simple but effective techniques, measuring with ropes, using stakes to establish straight lines, or employing basic proportional systems passed down through generations. Even so, maintaining symmetry over a span of 50 meters would have required coordination, planning, and repeated verification, especially when working with heavy stones that could not easily be repositioned once set in place. The effort involved suggests that accuracy was not incidental but essential, that the exact form of the ship mattered deeply to those who created it. Some researchers have proposed that the alignment of the stone ship may extend beyond visual symmetry into the realm of astronomy. In several ancient cultures, large-scale structures were oriented in relation to celestial events, such as solstices or equinoxes, serving as calendars or ritual markers tied to the movement of the sun. It is possible that the axis of the Anunchug stone ship corresponds to a specific solar direction, perhaps aligning with sunrise or sunset at a particular time of year. If this is the case, then the structure would function not only as a symbolic vessel, but also as a tool for observing or commemorating cosmic cycles, and such an interpretation would imply that the builders possessed an awareness of the sky's patterns and intentionally embedded this knowledge into the landscape. While definitive proof remains elusive, the possibility adds another dimension to the site's significance, transforming it from a static monument into an interactive element of a larger cosmological system. Beyond the stone ship itself, the surrounding features of Anunchug reinforce the impression of a carefully organized ceremonial environment. The enormous burial mound nearby, rising prominently above the flat terrain, is believed to date to the migration period and has been associated, though not conclusively, with a legendary king. Its scale alone suggests the presence of authority and social structure, indicating that this was a place of importance, but perhaps reserved for elite individuals or communal gatherings. Nearby runestones, inscribed with early Norse writing, hint at narratives of journeys, memory, and identity, connecting the physical landscape to stories and traditions that have only partially survived. An ancient roadway passes through the area, linking the site to broader networks of movement and exchange. Together, these elements form a cohesive setting in which the stone ship is not an isolated artifact, but part of an integrated system of meaning. The recurring appearance of stone ships across Scandinavia further deepens the mystery. These formations vary in size and context, but they share a common visual language. Stones arranged to evoke the shape of a vessel, often placed in prominent or symbolically significant locations, and the consistency of this motif suggests a shared cultural or religious concept, one that was widespread yet not fully standardized. Some stone ships contain burials, others do not. Some are small and intimate, others monumental, like the one at Anundshøg. This variation raises the possibility that the stone ship was a flexible symbol, adaptable to different purposes, while retaining a core meaning tied to transition, journey, or transformation. It may have represented not a single function, but a spectrum of rituals, each connected to the idea of movement between states, life and death, earth and sky, past and future. Ultimately, the Anundshøg stone ship remains an open question, a structure that invites interpretation without offering definitive answers. Its geometric precision stands as one of its most compelling features, challenging assumptions about the capabilities of early societies and hinting at forms of knowledge that were practical, refined, and perhaps even sophisticated in ways that are not immediately visible. Whether achieved through simple tools, used with extraordinary care, or guided by principles that have since been forgotten, the alignment of the stones reflects a deliberate engagement with space, proportion, and possibly even the cosmos itself. It is this combination of clarity and mystery that gives the site its enduring power. The stones do not move, the shape does not change, yet the meaning continues to shift with each new perspective, each new attempt to understand what it was meant to be. And so the silent ship of Anundshøg remains anchored in the Swedish earth, its form fixed, yet its purpose unresolved. Was it a vessel for the dead, a stage for ritual, a marker of celestial events, or something that combined all of these elements into a single, unified expression of belief? The precision of its design suggests intention beyond the purely symbolic, a level of care that implies deeper significance. But that significance, like the people who built it, has faded into the distance, leaving behind only stone, shape, and the enduring question of how and why it was created. In your opinion, what was the true purpose of the stone ship at Anundshøg? Spiritual ritual, astronomy, or a lost form of ancient knowledge? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Rising quietly from the arid plains of eastern Jordan, Qasr al-Halabat does not immediately reveal its secrets. At first glance, it appears to be yet another desert ruin, stone walls weathered by centuries of wind, fragments of columns scattered across the ground, and the faint outline of structures long abandoned. Yet beneath this seemingly simple exterior lies a complex architectural puzzle, one that spans multiple civilizations and defies easy classification. Qasr al-Halabat is not merely a relic of a single era. It is a layered monument, shaped and reshaped by Roman engineers, Byzantine builders, and Umayyad architects, each leaving behind traces of their own vision. The result is a site that feels less like a finished structure and more like an evolving experiment in architecture, adaptation, and purpose. The origins of the complex can be traced back to the Roman period, when it likely functioned as a military fort along the empire's eastern frontier. Its position suggests strategic intent, possibly as part of the Limes Arabicus, a defensive network designed to monitor movement across the desert and protect trade routes. The early structure would have been practical and defensive, built for surveillance and control rather than comfort. Thick stone walls, rectangular layouts, and limited ornamentation reflect a utilitarian design philosophy. Yet this original purpose did not remain fixed. As the Roman presence faded and the Byzantine period emerged, the site was reused and modified, incorporating elements that hint at changing priorities. Some additions suggest religious or communal use, while others appear to be simple adaptations of an existing structure to new needs. The most dramatic transformation, however, occurred during the Umayyad period in the 7th and 8th centuries. It was during this time that Qasr Halabat evolved into something far more complex and enigmatic. The Umayyads did not simply occupy the site, they reimagined it. They introduced new architectural features, including a mosque, a bathhouse, and decorative elements that contrast sharply with the austerity of the earlier Roman fort. This transformation raises an immediate question. Why would a remote desert site be developed into such a multifunctional complex? The addition of a hammam, complete with a hypocauste heating system, suggests a level of sophistication and comfort that seems out of place in an isolated environment. Maintaining such a system would have required not only technical knowledge, but also a reliable supply of water and fuel, resources not easily obtained in the surrounding landscape. The presence of the bathhouse is particularly striking. Modeled on Roman bathing traditions, it includes a sequence of rooms designed for different temperature experiences, cold, warm, and hot, supported by an underground heating system. This continuity of Roman engineering within an Umayyad context illustrates a remarkable transfer of knowledge across cultures and centuries. Yet, it also deepens the mystery. A structure built for leisure and hygiene implies regular occupation by individuals of status, not merely passing soldiers or traders. The logistics required to sustain such a facility suggest that Qasr Halabat was more than a temporary outpost. It was a place designed for extended use, possibly even for comfort and display. Equally intriguing is the mosque within the complex. As one of the early examples of Islamic religious architecture, it reflects a formative stage in the development of mosque design. Its simplicity contrasts with later, more standardized forms, and certain irregularities, such as slight deviations in orientation, indicate that architectural conventions were still evolving. The coexistence of a mosque, a bathhouse, and what appears to be a fortified structure creates a combination that is difficult to interpret. Each element points to a different function: religious, recreational, and defensive. Together, they form a composite that resists categorization. Adding to this complexity is the widespread use of spolia, the reuse of materials from earlier structures. Columns, carved stones, and decorative fragments from Roman and Byzantine buildings are incorporated into the Umayyad construction. This is not a random process of recycling, but a deliberate and skillful integration. The builders selected and arranged these elements in ways that preserved structural integrity while creating a visually layered aesthetic. The result is a building that physically embodies its own history, with each stone carrying echoes of a previous era. This practice raises further questions about intention. Was the reuse of materials purely practical, or did it serve a symbolic purpose, linking the Umayyad presence to the authority of earlier empires? But decorative elements throughout the complex add yet another layer of ambiguity. Mosaics and carvings display a mixture of geometric patterns, vegetal motifs, and even animal figures, an unusual feature given the later restrictions in Islamic art. These designs suggest a period of artistic experimentation, where influences from different traditions coexisted before more rigid conventions took hold. The presence of such imagery may indicate that the site functioned as a space of cultural transition, where older artistic forms were still accepted or reinterpreted within a new ideological framework. Despite all these clues, the central question remains unresolved. What was Qasr Halabat actually for? The evidence supports multiple interpretations, yet none fully explains the site in its entirety. One possibility is that it served as a desert palace, a retreat for Umayyad elites seeking respite from urban centers. The presence of a bathhouse, decorative art, and architectural refinement aligns with this idea. Desert palaces, or qasr complexes, are known from the Umayyad period, often combining elements of luxury, governance, and symbolism. In this context, Qasr Halabat could have been a place of leisure, diplomacy, or even display of power. However, this interpretation does not fully account for the site's defensive features and its earlier role as a military installation. The thick walls and strategic location suggest that control and surveillance remained important considerations. It is possible that the complex retained a dual function, serving both as a fortified outpost and a residence. But such a combination would not be unprecedented, particularly in frontier regions where security and administration were closely linked. Yet even this hybrid model leaves unanswered questions about the scale and sophistication of the amenities provided. Another theory proposes that Qasr Halabat functioned as a way station along trade or pilgrimage routes. Its location could have made it a stopping point for travelers crossing the desert, offering rest, water, and facilities. The bathhouse and mosque would have been valuable amenities in this context, but again, the level of architectural investment seems excessive for a simple caravan stop. The decorative richness and structural complexity suggest a purpose beyond mere utility. Yet perhaps the most compelling interpretation is that Qasr Halabat was intentionally multifunctional, a space designed to fulfill several roles simultaneously. It may have been a site where governance, leisure, religion, and military oversight intersected. In this sense, its apparent contradictions are not flaws, but features, reflecting a flexible approach to architecture and space. The Umayyad rulers, operating in a rapidly expanding and culturally diverse empire, may have embraced such hybridity as a practical solution to the challenges of frontier administration. Yet even this explanation does not fully resolve the mystery. The absence of definitive historical records leaves much to speculation, and the physical evidence, while rich, is open to multiple interpretations. Whereas Qasr Halabat remains a site where function is inferred rather than confirmed, where each architectural element hints at a different story. It stands as a reminder that ancient structures were not always bound by the clear categories we impose today. Instead, they could embody overlapping purposes, evolving over time in response to changing needs and influences. In the end, the true function of Qasr Halabat may never be fully known. Was it a palace, a fort, a religious center, or a hub of desert life? Or was it all of these at once, a reflection of a world where boundaries between roles were fluid and interconnected? The stones of Halabat do not provide a single answer. Instead, they invite us to consider the possibility that its greatest mystery lies not in what it was, but in how it defies our attempts to define it. In your opinion, is Qasr al-Halabat truly a desert palace, a military fortress, or something far more complex? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Rising from the fertile yet unpredictable plains of the Ararat Valley, the ancient city of Artashat, known in classical sources as Artaxata, once stood as the beating heart of a powerful kingdom, a place where politics, trade, and culture converged into a single, carefully constructed urban vision. Founded in the 2nd century BCE by King Artaxias I, Artashat was not simply another settlement carved into the landscape. It was a deliberate statement of ambition. Positioned strategically near the Araxes River, it controlled vital trade routes linking the Mediterranean world to the east, effectively transforming it into a crossroads of civilizations. Some ancient accounts even suggest that the legendary Carthaginian general Hannibal after his defeat by Rome, may have advised on the city's design, a claim that, whether fully accurate or not, reflects how exceptional Artashat appeared even to ancient observers. Yet despite this promising beginning and its undeniable importance, the city would eventually fade into obscurity, leaving behind only scattered stone remains and a mystery that continues to puzzle archaeologists and historians alike. What makes Artashat particularly remarkable is the sophistication of its urban planning. Unlike many contemporary cities that grew organically over time, Artashat appears to have been designed with a clear structural logic. Excavations reveal organized districts, separated zones for administration, habitation, and military functions, and a network of roads that suggests intentional planning rather than random expansion. This level of organization hints at external influences, possibly from Hellenistic urban traditions, but also suggests that local engineers and planners possessed a deep understanding of spatial control and governance. The city was not just built, it was orchestrated. Stone walls encircled its core, constructed from large, precisely placed blocks that have endured centuries of erosion. These fortifications, however, present their own enigma. While clearly defensive in nature, certain sections appear excessively thick for purely military purposes, while others lack optimal positioning for effective defense. This contradiction raises an intriguing possibility that the walls were as much symbolic as they were practical, serving as a visual manifestation of royal authority, a message carved in stone, declaring permanence in a world defined by constant change. And beneath the visible structures lies another layer of complexity, the remnants of a water management system that once sustained the city in a region marked by seasonal extremes. Archaeological traces suggest the presence of canals and possibly underground conduits, engineered to regulate and distribute water efficiently. Yet much of this system remains either buried or destroyed, leaving only fragments that hint at a level of hydraulic knowledge not fully understood today. If Artashat indeed possessed an advanced water network, it would place the city among a select group of ancient urban centers capable of manipulating their environment to ensure survival and growth. But this also introduces a critical question. If such systems existed, what happened to them? And more importantly, could their failure have contributed to the city's downfall? The most haunting aspect of Artashat is not how it was built, but how it disappeared. Historical records indicate that the city suffered multiple invasions, particularly from Roman forces during periods of conflict with Armenia. These events undoubtedly weaken the city, but they do not fully explain the speed and completeness of its decline. Archaeological evidence reveals layers of destruction, burned materials, collapsed structures, and abrupt discontinuities in habitation. These are not the gradual signs of urban decay. They point instead to sudden, possibly catastrophic events. One theory suggests that repeated military campaigns destabilized the region to such an extent that Artashat could no longer function as a capital, and another proposes environmental causes. Shifts in the course of the Araxes River may have disrupted water supply and trade routes simultaneously, effectively cutting the city off from its lifelines. Climate fluctuations, too, cannot be ruled out. Even minor changes in precipitation patterns could have had devastating effects on agriculture and water availability, triggering a chain reaction that led to abandonment. Yet there is something even more unsettling in the archaeological silence that followed. Cities rarely vanish completely. Even after destruction, they tend to be rebuilt, repurposed, or at least partially reoccupied. Artashat, however, seems to have been abandoned with unusual finality. This suggests that what occurred was not merely destructive, but transformative, something that altered the region's viability or significance so profoundly that returning became impractical or unnecessary. Was it a combination of war and environmental collapse, each reinforcing the other? Or was it a single, decisive event, perhaps an earthquake, a flood, or a systemic failure of infrastructure that rendered the city uninhabitable almost overnight? Adding to the mystery is the lack of definitive historical accounts describing the city's final days. While ancient texts mention conflicts and political shifts, they do not provide a clear narrative of Artashat's end. This absence of documentation creates a gap between what we know and what we can prove, leaving room for interpretation, but also for doubt. The stones that remain do not tell a complete story. They offer fragments, clues, and contradictions. Each excavation uncovers new details, yet also deepens the central question: how could a city so strategically located, so carefully planned, and so politically significant simply disappear? In many ways, Artashat embodies the paradox of ancient urban civilizations. It represents both the height of human organization and the fragility of that achievement. Its carefully laid streets, its imposing walls, and its hidden water systems all point to a society capable of remarkable coordination and foresight. And yet none of these were enough to ensure its survival. The very factors that once made Artashat powerful, its strategic location, its role as a political center, its integration into wider trade networks, may also have made it vulnerable to forces beyond its control. Today, at the ruins of Artashat lie quietly across the Armenian landscape, their silence more telling than any written record. They do not reveal a single dramatic moment of destruction, but rather a convergence of possibilities, a slow accumulation of pressures punctuated by sudden events. The city's disappearance is not a single mystery, but a layered one, where political conflict, environmental change, and infrastructural fragility intertwine. And perhaps that is the most compelling aspect of all. Artashat does not offer a clear answer. It offers a question, one that echoes across centuries. How does a city built to endure simply vanish? What do you think was the real reason behind Artashat's disappearance? War, environmental change, or a sudden catastrophe? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Deep within the limestone chambers of southern Germany, in what is now known as the Vogelherd Cave, archaeologists uncovered a collection of objects so small in scale, yet so vast in implication that they continue to challenge our understanding of early human cognition. These objects, delicately carved animal figurines made from mammoth ivory, date back approximately 40,000 years, placing them firmly within the Aurignacian culture, one of the earliest known periods of modern human presence in Europe. At first glance, they appear almost simple, miniature representations of animals that once roamed the Ice Age landscape. But the longer one studies them, the more they begin to reveal a profound and unsettling truth: that even at this early stage, humans were not merely surviving, but interpreting, symbolizing, and perhaps even mythologizing the world around them in ways that feel strikingly modern. The animals depicted in these carvings are not random. Lions, mammoths, horses, and bison dominate the collection, each rendered with a surprising degree of anatomical awareness. These were not creatures chosen arbitrarily. Many of them were powerful, dangerous, or spiritually significant within the environment of Ice Age Europe. The cave lion, for instance, was not a typical prey animal, yet it appears in the figurines with remarkable frequency and care. This suggests that the purpose of these carvings extended far beyond documentation or storytelling. Instead, they may have functioned as symbolic objects, embodiments of strength, fear, reverence, or even identity. And some researchers have proposed that these figurines acted as early forms of totems, representing either clan affiliations or spiritual connections between humans and the animal world. Others suggest they were tools of ritual, perhaps used by shamans attempting to bridge the physical and metaphysical realms. Yet despite decades of study, no single explanation fully accounts for their diversity, their consistency, and their undeniable intentionality. What makes the Vogelherd figurines particularly enigmatic, however, is not only what they represent, but how they were made. The craftsmanship involved in their creation is, by any standard, extraordinary. Mammoth ivory is an exceptionally dense and resilient material, far more difficult to shape than wood or bone. It requires not only strength, but precision, patience, and an intimate understanding of its internal structure. And yet these ancient artisans, working without metal tools, without advanced machinery, and without any known written tradition, managed to carve figures that exhibit fluid lines, balanced proportions, and intricate details that would challenge even modern craftsmen using contemporary equipment. The curvature of a horse's back, the tension in a lion's musculature, the subtle tapering of limbs, these are not crude approximations. They are deliberate, controlled, and refined. Microscopic analysis of the figurines reveals a complex sequence of techniques: incising, scraping, grinding, and polishing. The surfaces are not left rough. They are smoothed to a tactile finish, suggesting that the objects were meant to be handled, perhaps repeatedly. This implies not only technical ability, but also a cultural value placed on craftsmanship itself. The maker was not simply producing an object. They were engaging in a process that required time, focus, and likely years of accumulated skill. This raises a critical and still unresolved question. How did such advanced techniques develop so early in human history? Were these skills passed down through generations in a structured way, forming an unrecognized tradition of prehistoric artisanship? Or did they emerge independently, the result of repeated experimentation driven by necessity, curiosity, or spiritual motivation? Even more intriguing is the level of observational accuracy embedded within these carvings. To produce such lifelike representations, the creators must have possessed not only manual skill, but also a deep familiarity with animal anatomy and movement. This suggests prolonged and attentive observation of the natural world, perhaps even a form of proto-scientific thinking. The figurines are not stylized to the point of abstraction. They retain a sense of realism that indicates intentional fidelity to the subject. And yet, they are not purely realistic either. Certain features are emphasized, others simplified, hinting at a symbolic layer beneath the physical form. This duality between realism and abstraction further complicates our understanding of their purpose. Were these objects meant to capture the essence of the animal rather than its exact appearance? Were they tools for teaching, memory aids, or visual expressions of stories now lost to time? Their small size adds another dimension to the mystery. Most of the figurines are only a few centimeters in length and small enough to fit comfortably in the palm of a hand. This portability suggests that they were not fixed installations or communal displays, but personal objects, items that could be carried, touched, and perhaps even hidden. This raises the possibility that they functioned as amulets or talismans imbued with protective or symbolic power. The act of holding such an object, feeling its smooth surface, tracing its contours, may have been part of a ritual practice or a meditative experience. In this sense, the figurines were not merely visual artifacts, but tactile ones, designed to be experienced through multiple senses. The context in which they were found also offers clues, though none are definitive. Some were discovered in sediment layers associated with habitation, while others appeared in areas that may have held ritual significance. This ambiguity has led to a wide range of interpretations, from everyday objects to sacred instruments. It is possible that their function varied over time or across different groups, further complicating attempts to categorize them within a single framework. What remains consistent, however, is their presence across multiple sites within the Swabian Jura region, suggesting that this was not an isolated phenomenon, but part of a broader cultural pattern. When compared to other artifacts from the same period, the Vogelherd figurines stand out not only for their age, but for their sophistication. While other sites have yielded tools, ornaments, and occasional carvings, few match the level of detail and consistency seen here. This raises the possibility that the region was a center of early artistic or symbolic innovation, a place where new ideas about representation and meaning were being explored. If so, then these figurines may represent more than individual creations. They may be evidence of a cultural shift, a moment when humans began to see themselves not just as participants in the natural world, but as interpreters of it. And yet, for all that has been learned, the central mystery remains unresolved. Why did these early humans invest so much effort into creating such objects? What did they mean to those who made and used them? Were they expressions of belief, tools of communication, or simply acts of creativity for its own sake? The answers, if they ever existed in explicit form, have long since vanished. What we are left with are the objects themselves, silent, enduring, and deeply enigmatic. Perhaps that is their greatest power. In their smallness, they carry a weight of meaning that transcends time. They remind us that even at the dawn of human culture, there existed a desire not just to live, but to understand, to represent, and to connect with something beyond the immediate and the tangible. And in the delicate curves carved into ancient ivory, we glimpse not only the hands of our ancestors, but the early stirrings of the human imagination. An imagination that, even after 40,000 years, still speaks to us, still challenges us, and still refuses to be fully understood. What do you think is more impressive, the symbolic meaning behind these figurines, or the extraordinary craftsmanship achieved by humans at that time? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Tel Halaf Sculptural Zone stands as one of the most enigmatic artistic landscapes of the ancient Near East, a place where stone was not merely shaped, but challenged, resisted, and ultimately mastered in ways that still defy complete explanation today. Located in what is now northern Syria, Tel Halaf was once a thriving center of Aramaean power during the early 1st millennium BCE, particularly under the rule of King Kapara, who commissioned a monumental architectural and artistic program that would transform the site into a statement of authority, belief, and permanence. Yet what sets this site apart from many others is not simply its historical significance, but the extraordinary nature of its sculptural remains, especially the massive basalt statues that dominate the so-called sculptural zone. Although these works are not only impressive in scale or design, they represent a level of technical achievement that appears almost paradoxical when considering the material used. Basalt, a volcanic stone formed from cooled lava, is one of the hardest and most uncooperative materials available to ancient craftsmen. It is dense, abrasive, resistant to chiseling, and prone to unpredictable fracturing under pressure. making it far more difficult to work than softer stones like limestone or sandstone commonly used in other cultures. And yet, despite these challenges, the artisans of Tel Halaf not only chose basalt as their primary material, but succeeded in transforming it into sculptures of remarkable precision, detail, and expressive power. Now, this decision immediately raises important questions. Why choose such a difficult material when easier options were available? And what does this reveal about the mindset, capabilities, and worldview of the people who created these works? The statues themselves do not offer easy answers, but they provide clear evidence of extraordinary craftsmanship. Basalt lions crouch at entrances, their bodies filled with latent energy, muscles carefully modeled beneath the stone surface in a way that reflects both anatomical understanding and artistic sensitivity. Hybrid creatures, part human, part animal, stand as guardians, combining wings, claws, and human features into forms that are both symbolic and strangely lifelike. The carving of feathers, fur, and facial details demonstrates a level of control that seems to contradict the stubborn nature of the material, as if the artisans were not merely working with basalt, but imposing their full will upon it. Fine incisions capture subtle details, while symmetry is maintained across large, complex forms, indicating careful planning, measurement, and execution. This degree of precision suggests the use of advanced tools, possibly iron implements, yet even iron would struggle against basalt's hardness, leading to further questions about technique. Did these craftsmen employ specialized methods such as repetitive scoring, controlled fracturing, or polishing techniques that have not yet been identified? Were there lost methods of tool production or maintenance that enabled sustained work on such resistant stone? Where the archaeological record offers clues but no definitive answers, forcing modern researchers to infer from the finished works themselves. Equally remarkable is the scale of labor required. Creating a single large basalt statue could have demanded weeks or even months of continuous work by skilled artisans, and the presence of multiple such sculptures within a single complex suggests a highly organized system of production. This was not the work of isolated individuals, but of coordinated teams, possibly operating within specialized workshops under royal patronage, where knowledge and technique were shared, refined, and systematically applied. The sculptural zone therefore reflects not only artistic ambition, but also social structure, indicating a society capable of mobilizing resources, labor, and expertise on a significant scale. The choice of basalt may also carry symbolic meaning beyond its practical challenges. Its dark, almost black color under intense sunlight gives the sculptures a visual weight and authority that lighter stones cannot achieve. Basalt absorbs and reflects light in ways that emphasize depth and contour, creating strong contrasts that enhance the perception of form. In this sense, the material itself becomes an active element of the visual impact, reinforcing the role of the sculptures as guardians, symbols of power, or embodiments of supernatural forces. Its durability may have also been a factor, as basalt resists weathering more effectively, allowing these works to endure for millennia. Yet even this practical advantage does not fully explain the extent to which the material was embraced and mastered. These sculptures suggest a deliberate engagement with difficulty, as if the challenge of the material itself was an essential part of the artistic and cultural message. Beyond the technical achievements of the basalt statues, the sculptural zone also presents a complex symbolic landscape populated by hybrid beings and narrative reliefs. Many of the figures combine human and animal features in ways that do not correspond exactly to known mythological systems from neighboring cultures such as Assyria or Babylon. While there are similarities, winged figures, guardian animals, composite creatures, the specific forms and combinations seen at Tel Halaf appear to belong to a localized visual language, one that may have drawn inspiration from broader regional traditions but ultimately developed its own distinct grammar. Without accompanying texts, these images function as a kind of lost script, rich in meaning but lacking a clear key for interpretation. Their placement at entrances and along walls suggests protective or ritual functions, yet the precise nature of their symbolism remains elusive. This ambiguity is further reinforced by the orthostats, large stone panels carved in relief that line the walls of the palace complex. These panels depict scenes of daily life, ritual activity, and possibly mythological narratives, but their arrangement does not always follow a straightforward sequence. Instead, they appear to present a series of images that may have been intended to be understood collectively rather than linearly, perhaps conveying layered meanings accessible only to those familiar with the cultural and religious context of the time. The combination of monumental sculpture and narrative relief creates an environment in which architecture, art, and symbolism are deeply intertwined, forming a cohesive visual program that communicates power, identity, and belief. Another layer of complexity arises from the apparent blending of cultural influences within the artistic style of Tel Halaf. Elements reminiscent of Assyrian art, such as muscular forms and dynamic poses, coexist with geometric patterns associated with Anatolia and symbolic motifs from Mesopotamia. However, these influences are not simply combined in a passive manner. They are actively reinterpreted, resulting in a unique artistic identity that cannot be fully attributed to any single tradition. This suggests a high degree of cultural interaction, whether through trade, migration, or political contact, but also indicates a strong local agency in the adaptation and transformation of external ideas. Tel Halaf may have functioned as a cultural crossroads where different traditions met and were reshaped into something new, or it may have been an independent center of innovation that selectively incorporated influences while maintaining its own distinct vision. The historical trajectory of the site adds yet another dimension to its mystery. Despite the apparent sophistication of its artistic and architectural achievements, the style associated with Tel Halaf does not appear to have continued in a clear or influential lineage. Unlike the well-documented developments of Assyrian or Babylonian art, which evolved over time and left extensive records, the artistic tradition of Tel Halaf seems to emerge suddenly and then fade, leaving behind a body of work that is both impressive and isolated. This raises questions about the broader historical context in which these sculptures were created. Were they the product of a brief period of prosperity that was disrupted by political or environmental change? Did the knowledge and techniques required to produce them dissipate or become absorbed into other traditions in ways that are no longer recognizable? Or is it simply that the archaeological record remains incomplete and that further discoveries may yet reveal connections that are currently hidden? The modern history of the sculptures adds a final poignant chapter to their story. After their discovery in the early 20th century, many of the artifacts were transported to Europe, where they were later destroyed during the bombings of World War II, which reduced to thousands of fragments that seemed impossible to restore. Yet decades later, painstaking conservation efforts succeeded in reconstructing many of these works, reassembling them piece by piece in a process that echoes the original act of creation. This modern reconstruction not only underscores the enduring value of the sculptures, but also highlights the precision with which they were originally made, as their fragments could be fitted together with remarkable accuracy. In the end, the Tel Halaf sculptural zone stands as a powerful testament to human ingenuity, where one of the hardest stones on Earth was shaped into highly refined works that still challenge our understanding. The basalt statues reveal a striking paradox: a material that resists change yet appears completely mastered, and they force us to reconsider the true capabilities of ancient societies and remind us that history is not always a continuous path of progress. Some achievements rise suddenly, reach remarkable heights, and disappear, leaving behind evidence we can see, but not fully explain. How do you think ancient people were able to precisely carve such extremely hard basalt? Was it a lost technique, or are we still misunderstanding their technology? Share your thoughts in the comments below. In the vast, desolate expanse of northern Chile's Atacama Desert, one of the driest places on Earth, there exists a figure so immense that it can only truly be appreciated from the sky. Carved into the slopes of Cerro Unitas, the Atacama giant stands as the largest anthropomorphic geoglyph ever discovered, stretching approximately 119 meters in height. Unlike the more widely known Nazca lines, which depict animals and geometric forms scattered across a flat desert plain, this solitary giant dominates its hillside with an unmistakable human-like presence. It does not merely decorate the landscape, it commands it. And yet, despite its scale and prominence, its true purpose remains one of the most compelling, unsolved mysteries of the ancient world. The figure itself is strikingly unusual. Its body is elongated and geometric, with straight lines forming limbs that appear almost skeletal in their simplicity. The head, however, is what draws the most attention. It is crowned with a series of projections, sometimes described as spikes, antennae, or ceremonial adornments that extend outward in a pattern that feels deliberate rather than decorative. These features have led researchers to speculate that the Atacama giant may represent a deity, a spiritual figure, or a powerful leader from an ancient Andean culture. Its rigid posture and stylized form suggest symbolism rather than realism, implying that it was never intended to depict an ordinary human being. Instead, it may embody something far more abstract: authority, cosmology, or a connection between the terrestrial and the divine. One of the most intriguing interpretations of the geoglyph is its possible function as an astronomical or calendrical tool. The Atacama Desert, despite its harshness, was home to ancient communities that depended on precise environmental knowledge to survive. Rainfall was rare and unpredictable, making it essential to track seasonal changes with great accuracy. Some researchers have proposed that the lines and markings surrounding the giant, or even the proportions of the figure itself, could align with lunar cycles or celestial events. The projections on its head, in particular, have been interpreted as markers that correspond to the phases of the moon or positions of certain stars. If this theory holds true, the Atacama giant would not merely be an artistic creation, but a functional instrument, a massive, ground-based calendar designed to guide agricultural or ritual activities in one of the most unforgiving environments on Earth. The construction of such a figure raises equally fascinating questions. Unlike structures built from towering stone blocks or intricate masonry, the Atacama giant was created using a deceptively simple technique. Stones were arranged on the surface, or the top layer of lighter soil was removed to reveal darker material beneath, forming high-contrast lines visible from a distance. This method, while straightforward in principle, required an extraordinary level of planning and coordination. The proportions of the figure had to be maintained across a massive scale, suggesting that its creators possessed not only artistic vision, but also a sophisticated understanding of spatial organization. Moreover, the durability of the geoglyph, surviving for over a millennium in a region known for extreme temperature fluctuations and powerful winds, speaks to a deep knowledge of the local environment. The desert itself, with its lack of rainfall and minimal erosion, became an unwitting preserver of this ancient message. Yet, for all that can be observed and hypothesized, the most profound mystery of the Atacama giant lies in a simple question that has resisted every attempt at a definitive answer. Who created it, and for what purpose? This question, more than any other, defines the enduring enigma of the geoglyph. Archaeological evidence suggests that the figure may have been constructed between the 9th and 15th centuries, possibly by cultures influenced by or connected to the Tiwanaku civilization, and which once flourished in the Andean region. However, no direct records, inscriptions, or artifacts have been found that explicitly link the giant to a specific people or explain its meaning. It exists in isolation, detached from the narratives that usually help historians reconstruct the past. This absence of context has led to a wide range of interpretations, each as compelling as it is uncertain. One possibility is that the Atacama giant served a religious or ceremonial function. In many ancient cultures, large-scale geoglyphs were created as offerings to deities or as expressions of spiritual belief. The figure's commanding presence and elevated position on a hillside could indicate that it was meant to be seen not by humans, but by gods or celestial beings. Its exaggerated features might symbolize divine attributes, and transforming the giant into a mediator between worlds, a visual prayer etched into the earth itself. Another theory suggests that the geoglyph functioned as a territorial marker, a declaration of presence and identity by the people who created it. In a landscape as vast and featureless as the Atacama Desert, such a monumental figure could serve as a landmark, signaling ownership or guiding travelers across the barren terrain. If this is the case, the giant becomes less of a spiritual symbol and more of a practical one, embedded within the social and economic realities of ancient life. Yet even this interpretation raises further questions. Why choose such a complex and symbolic form for a marker, and why place it in a location that is difficult to access? The astronomical hypothesis adds another layer of complexity, and if the Atacama giant was indeed used to track celestial cycles, then its creators must have possessed a level of observational knowledge that is not fully documented elsewhere in the region. This would imply a sophisticated intellectual tradition, one capable of translating the movements of the heavens into a fixed terrestrial form. But without written records or corroborating evidence, this idea remains speculative, hovering between possibility and conjecture. What makes the mystery even more compelling is the sheer scale of the effort required to create the geoglyph. This was not the work of a single individual, nor was it likely completed in a short period of time. It would have required coordination, planning, and a shared vision among a community of people. And that community has left behind almost no trace of its intentions. The Atacama giant stands as a paradox, a massive, unmistakable presence that communicates almost nothing with certainty. It is both a message and a silence. In comparing the Atacama giant to other geoglyph traditions, such as those found in Nazca, one is struck by both the similarities and the differences. Like the Nazca lines, the giant is best viewed from above, suggesting a perspective that ancient people could not have easily accessed. This has fueled speculation about ritual viewing practices or elevated observation points, but no definitive explanation has been confirmed. Unlike Nazca, however, the Atacama giant is singular and focused, its form concentrated into a single, imposing figure rather than a sprawling collection of designs. This singularity may indicate a different cultural or symbolic framework, one that prioritized the power of a lone image over a network of interconnected symbols. Ultimately, the Atacama giant resists easy interpretation. It does not fit neatly into any one category, art, science, religion, or utility, but instead seems to exist at the intersection of all these domains. Its creators, whoever they were, left behind a work that transcends time, inviting each generation to project its own questions and theories onto its silent form. And perhaps that is the most enduring aspect of its mystery. The giant does not reveal its secrets. It compels us to confront the limits of our understanding. Standing before the Atacama giant today, one cannot help but feel a sense of awe mixed with uncertainty. It is a reminder that even in an age of advanced technology and global knowledge, there are still traces of the past that remain just beyond our grasp. The desert has preserved this colossal figure with remarkable fidelity, but it has also concealed the story behind it with equal determination. And so the question remains, echoing across the centuries without resolution: who created the Atacama giant? And what message were they trying to leave behind? In your opinion, is the Atacama giant an ancient astronomical tool, a religious symbol, or a message we still don't understand? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The Tel Leilan Acropolis sector, located in northeastern Syria, stands as one of the most revealing yet enigmatic archaeological zones in the study of ancient Mesopotamian urbanism, offering a layered record of power, collapse, and resilience that spans thousands of years. Rising above the surrounding plains as a monumental mound, the Acropolis once formed the administrative and ceremonial heart of a vast city that flourished during the 3rd millennium BCE, particularly under the influence of the Akkadian Empire. Here, massive architectural complexes, palaces, storage facilities, and bureaucratic centers were constructed not merely as isolated structures, but as components of a highly organized system of governance that controlled agricultural production, labor distribution, and regional trade. But yet what makes this site truly extraordinary is not just its scale or complexity, but the abrupt and almost violent interruption of its continuity, a moment in time that appears frozen in the archaeological record with unsettling clarity. Beneath layers of later occupation, archaeologists uncovered evidence pointing to a sudden and dramatic collapse around the late 3rd millennium BCE, coinciding with the decline of the Akkadian Empire. At the center of this mystery lies a peculiar and unmistakable feature: a thick layer of fine, wind-blown dust that blankets the Acropolis sector. This deposit, unlike typical habitation debris or construction rubble, suggests a prolonged period of aridity and environmental stress rather than destruction by warfare or fire. It is widely associated with what scientists now refer to as the 4.2 kilo-year event, a large-scale climatic shift that affected vast regions of the Near East, triggering droughts severe enough to disrupt agricultural systems that had sustained complex societies for centuries. In Tel Leilan, this environmental crisis appears not as a gradual decline, but as a sharp rupture, a tipping point where an intricate urban system, dependent on stable climatic conditions, could no longer sustain itself. What is particularly striking is the nature of the abandonment itself. Unlike cities that show signs of siege, burning, or gradual decay, the Acropolis sector reveals a pattern of sudden cessation. Administrative buildings, once bustling with activity, appear to have been left behind, with minimal signs of orderly deconstruction. And storage areas and rooms that once held clay tablets and economic records seem to have been abandoned in haste, as if the governing institutions that once animated them simply ceased to function. This sense of interruption is further reinforced by the presence of cuneiform tablets found in situ, many of which document systems of resource management, grain allocation, and labor organization. These records, preserved by time, offer a glimpse into a society that was not declining slowly, but was instead operating at full capacity shortly before its collapse. The emphasis on environmental causation, however, does not fully resolve the mystery. It deepens it. Climate alone rarely acts in isolation, and the case of Tel Leilan raises profound questions about the fragility of complex systems. The rapid expansion of the city during the Akkadian period, likely driven by imperial demands for agricultural output, may have stretched local resources to their limits. Irrigation networks, labor systems, and storage infrastructures would have required constant maintenance and coordination, all of which depended on predictable environmental conditions. When those conditions shifted, when rainfall patterns changed and droughts set in, the entire system may have unraveled with astonishing speed. In this sense, the dust layer is not merely a geological marker, it is a silent witness to a cascading failure, where environmental stress exposed underlying vulnerabilities within the social and economic fabric of the city. Adding another layer of intrigue is the absence of clear evidence for adaptive responses. In many ancient societies, and periods of environmental stress are accompanied by shifts in settlement patterns, technological innovation, or changes in subsistence strategies. At Tel Leilan, however, the archaeological record suggests a more abrupt disengagement. The city does not appear to have transitioned into a smaller, more sustainable settlement. Instead, it was largely abandoned, its core functions discontinued. This raises the possibility that the scale and rigidity of its administrative system may have hindered its ability to adapt. A highly centralized structure, efficient under stable conditions, may have become a liability in times of crisis, unable to respond flexibly to rapidly changing circumstances. The Acropolis itself, as the focal point of authority, embodies this paradox. Its monumental buildings and organized layout reflect a society of remarkable coordination and control, yet these same qualities may have contributed to its downfall. The very systems that enabled rapid growth and expansion may have lacked the resilience needed to withstand environmental disruption. In this light, the sudden collapse of Tel Leilan is not simply a story of climate change, but a case study in systemic vulnerability, an ancient example of how complex societies can reach a threshold beyond which recovery becomes impossible. Even after its abandonment, the site did not remain entirely silent. Later periods saw reoccupation, with new communities settling atop the remnants of the old, constructing their own buildings over the buried layers of the past. As yet these later phases never fully replicated the scale or complexity of the Akkadian-era city, suggesting that whatever conditions once supported such a large and organized urban center had fundamentally changed. The Acropolis became a palimpsest of human activity, each layer partially obscuring and partially preserving the ones beneath, creating a challenging puzzle for modern archaeologists attempting to reconstruct its history. Today, The Tel Leilan Acropolis sector stands as one of the most compelling pieces of evidence for the impact of ancient climate events on human societies, yet it also resists simple explanations. Was the drought the primary cause of collapse, or merely the catalyst that exposed deeper structural weaknesses? Did political instability, economic overextension, and/or social unrest play a role alongside environmental stress? And perhaps most intriguingly, how did the people of Tel Leilan perceive and respond to the changes unfolding around them? These questions remain open, embedded within the soil-like dust that once settled silently over a thriving city, marking the end of an era. In the end, Tel Leilan is more than an archaeological site. It is a narrative frozen in earth and sediment, a moment when human ambition met environmental reality with irreversible consequences. Its Acropolis sector, once the nerve center of a powerful urban system, now serves as a reminder that even the most advanced societies of the ancient world were not immune to sudden collapse. And as modern researchers continue to study its layers, the story it tells feels increasingly relevant, echoing across millennia as both a mystery and a warning. In your opinion, what truly caused the collapse of Tel Leilan? Climate change, or the inherent fragility of human systems? Share your thoughts in the comments below. In the heart of the Syrian desert, far from any reliable river or fertile valley, the ancient city of Resafa, also known historically as Sergiopolis, rises from the barren landscape like a paradox carved in stone. Surrounded by an immense defensive wall stretching more than 4 kilometers in length, reinforced by a rhythmic sequence of rectangular towers, the fortress appears at first glance to be a purely military installation. Yet the deeper one looks, the more Resafa reveals itself as something far more complex, a carefully engineered urban organism designed not merely to survive in one of the harshest environments imaginable, but to flourish. Its walls, built from precisely cut limestone blocks and still standing after centuries of erosion, testify to a level of planning and coordination that challenges assumptions about what ancient builders could achieve under extreme conditions. However, beyond the imposing geometry of its fortifications, beyond the silent towers that once watched the desert horizon, lies a mystery far greater than the walls themselves, a mystery that defines the very existence of Resafa, the question of water. To understand the true enigma of Resafa, one must first confront its environment. This was not a city built beside a river, nor near a natural spring, nor even in a region known for seasonal abundance. The surrounding desert offers no permanent water sources, no predictable rainfall patterns, and no fertile soil capable of sustaining large populations. And yet, historical evidence indicates that Resafa supported a thriving community for centuries. It functioned not only as a fortified settlement, but also as a major pilgrimage center, attracting visitors from across the Byzantine world who came to honor Saint Sergius. Pilgrims, merchants, soldiers, and clergy all converged within its walls, creating a dynamic urban life that should not have been possible in such an unforgiving setting. The contradiction is stark and unavoidable. How did a city with no natural access to water sustain itself for so long? The answer, though partially understood, only deepens the mystery. Beneath the visible surface of Resafa lies an intricate network of massive underground cisterns, vaulted reservoirs engineered to capture, store, and preserve water with remarkable efficiency. These cisterns were not small, improvised basins, but monumental constructions in their own right, some capable of holding thousands of cubic meters of water. They were strategically distributed throughout the city, forming a hidden infrastructure that functioned as the lifeline of the entire settlement. Rainwater, scarce and unpredictable as it was, became the foundation of survival. Through a carefully designed system of channels, surfaces, and gradients, even the smallest amounts of rainfall were collected and directed into these reservoirs. Roofs, courtyards, and open spaces were not merely architectural features. They were components of a vast water harvesting machine. What makes this system extraordinary is not just its existence, but its precision. The engineers of Resafa appear to have possessed an advanced understanding of hydrology, geometry, and long-term resource management. They had to calculate how much water could be collected during infrequent rains, how much would be lost to evaporation, and how much would be required to sustain the population through extended dry periods. This was not a margin for error environment. A miscalculation could mean the difference between survival and abandonment. The cisterns themselves were constructed with materials and techniques that minimized leakage, suggesting knowledge of waterproofing methods that remain effective even after centuries of exposure. Their placement within the city also reflects a strategic logic, ensuring that water could be accessed efficiently while being protected from contamination and excessive evaporation. And yet, despite all this, critical questions remain unanswered. And how did the builders determine the exact capacity needed for these reservoirs? Without modern measuring instruments, without advanced meteorological data, how did they predict rainfall patterns with enough accuracy to design such a system? Was this knowledge accumulated gradually through generations of trial and error, or was it the result of a more sudden, sophisticated understanding of environmental engineering? Some scholars suggest that Resafa represents the culmination of desert survival techniques developed over centuries across the Near East, while others argue that its system is too advanced, too integrated to be explained by incremental progress alone. Equally puzzling is the logistical challenge of constructing such infrastructure. Excavating massive underground chambers in a desert environment, aligning them with waterproof materials, and integrating them into a city-wide network would have required not only technical expertise, but also significant labor organization. This implies a level of centralized planning and authority capable of mobilizing resources on a large scale. The walls of Resafa may symbolize strength and defense, but the cisterns beneath symbolize something far more fundamental: control over the most essential element of life in a place where it is almost entirely absent. The importance of this water system also reshapes how we interpret the city itself. Resafa was not simply built in the desert, it was built against the desert. Every aspect of its design, from the thickness of its walls to the layout of its internal structures, reflects an awareness of environmental extremes. The walls, and often seen as defensive barriers, also functioned as thermal regulators, protecting the interior from the intense heat of the day and the cold of the night. The urban layout facilitated airflow, reducing heat accumulation and improving living conditions. But all of these features, impressive as they are, would have been meaningless without a reliable water supply. In this sense, the true foundation of Resafa is not its stone walls, but its invisible network of reservoirs. There is also a deeper, more philosophical dimension to this mystery. The existence of Resafa challenges the assumption that ancient civilizations were limited by their environments. Instead, it suggests that, given sufficient knowledge and organization, they could transform even the most hostile landscapes into functional, enduring settlements. But this raises another question. If such knowledge existed, why is it not more widely evident in other desert cities of the same period? Why does Resafa stand out as an exception rather than the rule? The eventual decline and abandonment of the city adds yet another layer of intrigue. Despite its advanced systems and strategic importance, Resafa did not endure indefinitely. At some point, the balance it had achieved with its environment was disrupted, whether due to climatic changes, shifts in trade routes, political instability, or the gradual failure of its water infrastructure. The city was ultimately deserted. The cisterns that once sustained life fell silent, their stored water evaporating or seeping away over time. The walls remained, but the system that gave them purpose ceased to function. Today, even the ruins of Resafa stand as a testament to both human ingenuity and the limits of adaptation. The fortress walls still trace their geometric outline across the desert, and the remnants of its cisterns still hint at the hidden complexity beneath the surface. But the central mystery endures. The water system of Resafa is not just an example of ancient engineering, it is a question that has yet to be fully answered. How did a civilization, without modern technology, design and maintain such a precise and effective solution in one of the most inhospitable environments on Earth? And perhaps more importantly, what does this reveal about the knowledge that has been lost over time? If the walls of Resafa represent what we can see and measure, then its water system represents what we are still struggling to understand. It is here, in the silent chambers beneath the desert, that the true story of the fortress begins. Not as a tale of defense or conquest, but as a profound and unresolved dialogue between human ambition and the limits of nature. In your opinion, what was the true secret that allowed Resafa to survive in such a harsh desert? Human engineering intelligence or lost knowledge from the past? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The fortress of Amberd rises in stark isolation on the slopes of Mount Aragats, a structure that appears less like a human construction and more like an extension of the mountain itself, fused seamlessly into rock and sky. Positioned at an altitude exceeding 2,300 meters, it commands a landscape carved by deep gorges and harsh winds, where survival alone would have been a challenge, let alone the construction of a fortified stronghold. Yet Amberd was not only built here, it was engineered with an extraordinary level of foresight, most notably through its dual wall system, a layered defensive design that transforms the fortress into a multi-stage barrier capable of absorbing and neutralizing threats with calculated efficiency. At first glance, the concept of two walls may seem simple, but within the context of its environment, execution, and material precision, it becomes clear that Amberd represents a far more complex understanding of both warfare and construction than is typically attributed to its era. The outer wall stretches along the natural contours of the terrain, bending and shifting in response to cliffs, slopes, and narrow ridgelines, creating a defensive perimeter that is anything but uniform. This irregularity is not a flaw, but a deliberate adaptation, forcing any approaching force into constrained pathways where movement becomes predictable and vulnerable. Beyond this first barrier lies the inner wall, positioned higher and built with greater density, forming the true defensive core of the fortress. Between these two layers exists a controlled space that functions as a deadly corridor, a zone where attackers, having already expended energy breaching the first wall, would find themselves exposed from above, below, and all sides. This arrangement reflects a strategic principle known today as defense in depth, yet here it was realized centuries earlier, not as a theoretical concept, but as a tangible, functioning system carved into the mountain. However, beyond its tactical brilliance, the most compelling and least understood aspect of Amberd lies in its hidden engineering, its materials, construction techniques, and long-term durability under extreme conditions. The fortress is built primarily from large stone blocks, many of them basalt, a material known for its hardness and resistance, but also for the difficulty it presents in shaping and transporting. The choice of basalt alone suggests a deliberate decision to prioritize longevity and structural integrity over ease of construction. In a region defined by freezing winters, rapid temperature fluctuations, strong winds, and seismic instability, such a choice would have been essential, yet it also raises immediate questions. How were these stones quarried with sufficient precision? How were they transported across steep, uneven terrain to such a high elevation? And perhaps most importantly, how were they assembled in a way that allowed the structure to endure for centuries without significant collapse? Close examination of the walls reveals a level of stonework that borders on the extraordinary. In several sections, the blocks are fitted so tightly that the presence of mortar becomes almost negligible. The joints between stones are minimal, sometimes nearly invisible, suggesting a degree of cutting accuracy that would be difficult to achieve even with modern tools. This precision is not merely aesthetic, it has direct structural implications. Tightly fitted stones distribute weight more evenly, reduce points of weakness, and increase resistance to both environmental stress and physical impact. In a high-altitude setting, where freeze-thaw cycles can gradually destroy less precise constructions, this method would significantly extend the lifespan of the walls. Yet the mystery deepens when considering the tools and techniques available at the time. Basalt is notoriously difficult to shape due to its density, requiring tools capable of withstanding repeated impact without degrading. The existence of such finely cut blocks suggests either highly specialized tools, advanced techniques that are not well documented, or a level of craftsmanship passed down through generations and now largely lost. The possibility that builders possessed an intuitive or empirical understanding of stress distribution adds another layer of intrigue. The walls do not simply stand. They appear to be balanced against the forces acting upon them, angled and positioned in ways that minimize structural strain and maximize stability. Transporting these stones presents another unresolved challenge. Moving large basalt blocks up steep mountain slopes without modern machinery would have required a coordinated effort, sophisticated planning, and possibly the use of techniques that have not survived in historical records. Whether through sledges, rollers, or carefully constructed ramps, the logistics alone imply a workforce operating with remarkable organization and knowledge. The question is not only how they moved the stones, but how they did so consistently enough to maintain the precision seen throughout the structure. Durability, however, is where Amber's hidden engineering becomes most evident. Centuries of exposure have left their mark. Erosion, cracks, and partial collapses are visible, but the core structure remains intact. This resilience suggests that the builders did not merely construct for the present, they anticipated the future. The choice of materials, the method of assembly, and the integration with the natural terrain all contribute to a system that resists time itself. In many ways, yes, the fortress behaves less like a man-made object and more like a geological formation, adapting to environmental stress rather than succumbing to it. Even the interaction between the dual walls and the materials used reveals a deeper level of planning. The outer wall, more exposed and more irregular, absorbs the initial impact of both environmental forces and potential attacks, while the inner wall, built with greater density and precision, serves as a final, enduring barrier. This distribution of structural roles mirrors the defensive strategy itself, suggesting that the engineering and military design were not separate considerations but part of a unified vision. What makes all of this particularly enigmatic is the lack of detailed historical records explaining how such techniques were developed or implemented. And Amberd stands as evidence of knowledge that is only partially understood today, a silent testament to skills and methods that may have been common in their time but have since faded into obscurity. It challenges modern assumptions about the limitations of medieval engineering, hinting at a level of sophistication that is often overlooked or underestimated. In the end, the dual-wall system of Amberd is not just a defensive feature. It is the visible expression of a deeper, hidden intelligence embedded within the structure itself. The stones, the angles, the placement, and the endurance all point toward a deliberate and highly advanced approach to construction, one that prioritizes resilience, efficiency, and adaptability. Standing within its walls, surrounded by the weight of stone and the vastness of the surrounding landscape, one cannot help but question whether Amberd was simply a fortress, or whether it was the product of a knowledge system far more advanced than history has managed to preserve. Do you think Amberd was just a typical defensive fortress, or a trace of a lost ancient engineering system? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The temple core of Zvartnots stands as one of the most enigmatic architectural achievements of the early medieval world, rising from the Ararat Plain in what is now Armenia as both a spiritual monument and a bold experiment in engineering. Constructed in the 7th century under the patronage of Catholicos Nerses III, this structure defied nearly every architectural convention of its time. While most Christian sanctuaries followed the longitudinal basilica or cruciform plan, Zvartnots embraced a radically different vision, a circular, multi-tiered composition that seemed to echo cosmic order more than earthly tradition. At its heart, the temple core functioned not merely as a place of worship, but as an architectural statement, an attempt to translate theological symbolism, political authority, and advanced structural knowledge into stone. Even in ruin, the surviving columns and fragmented arcades suggest a once soaring structure that may have reached unprecedented heights for its era, capturing both the ambition and the technical daring of its builders. What makes the temple core particularly compelling is its circular geometry, organized in concentric rings that appear almost mathematical in their precision. The innermost space likely housed the sacred focal point, surrounded by layers of columns and galleries that expanded outward in a harmonious radial pattern. This design may have symbolized the heavens, with the central axis acting as a spiritual conduit between the earthly realm and the divine. Yet beyond symbolism, such a layout also presents complex engineering challenges. Circular structures distribute loads differently from rectangular ones, requiring a deep understanding of weight transfer, lateral forces, and material limitations. The builders of Zvartnots were not merely experimenting with form. They were engaging in a sophisticated manipulation of geometry to achieve both stability and visual impact. This duality between symbolic meaning and structural necessity lies at the core of Zvartnots' enduring mystery. However, it is in the construction techniques of the temple core that the true depth of its sophistication becomes apparent. The structure was built primarily from finely cut basalt, a volcanic stone known for its hardness and durability. Working with basalt is notoriously difficult even with modern tools, yet the craftsmen of Zvartnots managed to shape massive blocks with astonishing precision. Each stone appears to have been cut and fitted in such a way that joints between them are nearly invisible, suggesting a level of craftsmanship that rivals much later architectural traditions. Rather than relying heavily on mortar to bind the structure, the builders employed a method of tight-fitting stone assembly, where the stability of the structure depended on the exact geometry of each block. This approach required not only advanced tools, but also an exceptional understanding of measurement, alignment, and load distribution. The columns of the temple core further demonstrate this remarkable level of technical mastery. Carved from single pieces of stone, now they were not only structurally functional, but also richly decorated with intricate motifs, including vine scrolls, eagles, and geometric patterns. These carvings were executed with a precision that suggests the use of specialized tools and techniques, possibly including early forms of abrasion or controlled chiseling methods that allowed for both detail and consistency. The capitals in particular reveal a blend of local Armenian artistic traditions and broader influences from Byzantine and possibly even earlier classical sources. Yet despite these stylistic connections, the execution at Zvartnots is uniquely refined, as if the artisans were pushing the limits of what stone carving could achieve at the time. Equally impressive is the way these carved elements were integrated into the structural system of the building. The columns were arranged in circular tiers, supporting arches and galleries that rose in successive levels. This multi-tiered design required careful coordination between vertical and horizontal forces, as each level added weight and complexity to the overall structure. The precision with which the stones were cut and placed would have been critical in ensuring that these forces were distributed evenly, preventing localized stress points that could lead to failure. In this sense, the temple core of Zvartnots can be seen as an early example of advanced structural engineering, where aesthetic ambition was matched by technical innovation. Another aspect that underscores the ingenuity of Zvartnots' construction is the apparent absence of trial and error in its execution. Unlike many ancient structures that show signs of modification or reinforcement over time, Zvartnots appears to have been conceived and built as a complete and coherent system from the outset. This suggests that its designers possessed a highly developed conceptual understanding of the building's behavior, possibly supported by empirical knowledge passed down through generations of builders. It also raises intriguing questions about the transmission of technical knowledge in the ancient world. How did these builders acquire such expertise? Were there written manuals, or was this knowledge preserved through oral tradition and apprenticeship? Yet for all its sophistication, the temple core ultimately did not withstand the test of time. Sometime in the 10th century, the structure collapsed, and most likely as a result of an earthquake, a common occurrence in the region. This event has often been interpreted as evidence that despite its advanced design, Zvartnots may have pushed beyond the limits of what its materials and techniques could sustain. The very features that made it innovative, its height, its circular form, its multi-tiered construction, may also have made it vulnerable to seismic forces. Unlike more compact or flexible structures, the rigid stone framework of Zvartnots would have had limited capacity to absorb and dissipate the energy of an earthquake. This raises a paradox at the heart of its design. Was Zvartnots a masterpiece of engineering, or a bold experiment that ultimately revealed the boundaries of ancient construction technology? Yet the symbolic dimension of the temple core adds another layer of complexity to this question. The decorative program of the building, with its rich array of carvings and motifs, suggests that it was intended to convey more than structural prowess. The presence of royal and religious symbols indicates that Zvartnots may have served as a stage for the production of both divine and earthly authority. In this context, the technical achievements of its construction can be seen as part of a broader effort to project power and legitimacy. The ability to build such a structure would have demonstrated not only the skill of its craftsmen, but also the organizational capacity and resources of the society that produced it. Perhaps the most enduring mystery of the temple core of Zvartnots is why its design was never replicated, and despite its apparent sophistication and the prestige it must have commanded, no later structures follow its exact model. This absence suggests that something about Zvartnots, whether its cost, its complexity, or its structural vulnerability, made it impractical as a prototype for future construction. Alternatively, it may indicate that the knowledge required to build such a structure was lost, either through the disruption of political and cultural continuity or through the simple passage of time. In either case, Zvartnots remains a singular achievement, a moment in history when architectural ambition and technical capability converged in a way that was never quite repeated. Today, the ruins of Zvartnots offer only a fragmentary glimpse of its former grandeur, yet they continue to inspire both admiration and inquiry. The fallen columns and scattered stones are not merely remnants of a lost building. They are clues to a deeper story about human ingenuity, ambition, and the limits of knowledge. The temple core, in particular, stands as a testament to what was possible in an age often underestimated in terms of technological sophistication. It challenges modern assumptions about the capabilities of ancient builders and invites us to reconsider the boundaries between art, engineering, and belief. In the end, the temple core of Zvartnots is more than an architectural curiosity. It is a puzzle that remains only partially solved. Its innovative design, its extraordinary construction techniques, and its ultimate collapse all point to a complex interplay between vision and reality, between what humans aspire to build and what they are able to sustain. And perhaps that is its greatest legacy, not a definitive answer, but an enduring question about how far ancient knowledge truly extended and how much of it may still lie hidden beneath the stones. If you were an ancient architect, would you dare to build something as ambitious as Zvartnots, or would you choose a safer design? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Below the harsh granite peaks of the Latmos Mountains, overlooking the still and reflective waters of Lake Bafa, the ruins of Yedala Monastery remain suspended in a strange silence, neither fully lost to time nor fully understood by it. Known today as Yedala Monastery, this remote Byzantine site does not immediately impress through monumental scale or architectural grandeur. Instead, its mystery unfolds slowly, embedded in its isolation, its improbable construction, and above all, in the fragile yet enduring traces of color that still cling to its stone walls. Built sometime between the 8th and 13th centuries, during a period when the Byzantine Empire struggled with both external pressures and internal transformations, the monastery appears to have been deliberately placed in one of the most inaccessible landscapes imaginable. The Latmos region is a terrain of fractured granite boulders stacked in chaotic formations that create natural corridors, hidden chambers, and narrow pathways that can only be navigated with effort and intent. It is within this rugged environment that the monastery was carved, literally extracted from the rock itself, rather than assembled from transported materials. This alone raises a fundamental question. Why would a community of religious practitioners choose to embed themselves so deeply into such an unforgiving setting? The answer may lie in the spiritual traditions of Byzantine monasticism, particularly the practice of eremitism, in which individuals or small groups withdrew from society in pursuit of divine contemplation. In this context, isolation was not a disadvantage, but a necessity, a way to strip away the distractions of the world and confront the self in its most vulnerable form. Yet even within this framework, Yedala Monastery remains unusual. Unlike larger monastic complexes that developed into semi-self-sufficient communities, this site shows little evidence of large-scale habitation. There are no expansive refectories, no clearly defined agricultural terraces, no infrastructure that would support a significant population over extended periods. Instead, what we find are a series of small, interconnected spaces carved into the rock, cells, chapels, and narrow passageways that suggest a highly intimate, almost ascetic mode of existence. And the very act of carving these spaces into hard granite would have required not only time and labor, but also a level of technical skill that challenges our assumptions about the capabilities of isolated monastic groups. Granite is not a forgiving material. It resists shaping, demands persistence, and punishes imprecision. Yet within Yedala, the surfaces of these carved interiors are often surprisingly regular, their volumes carefully proportioned, their transitions deliberate rather than accidental. This is not the work of improvisation. It is the result of planning, knowledge, and sustained effort. However, it is not the architecture alone that defines the enduring enigma of Yedala Monastery. The most haunting and perhaps most revealing elements of the site lie within its interior walls, one where fragments of Byzantine frescoes still survive. These paintings, though faded and partially eroded, continue to assert their presence with a quiet resilience that seems almost defiant. In a place where wind, moisture, temperature fluctuations, and the slow but relentless processes of geological decay should have erased all traces of human expression, color remains. Figures can still be discerned. Christ, the Virgin Mary, saints rendered in stylized forms characteristic of Byzantine iconography. Their faces, though worn, retain a sense of solemnity. Their gestures, though incomplete, still communicate meaning. It is here, in these fragile remnants, that the mystery deepens most profoundly. The survival of these frescoes over centuries is not merely a matter of chance, and it suggests a sophisticated understanding, whether empirical or intuitive, of materials, techniques, and environmental conditions. Byzantine artists were known to employ a range of pigments derived from natural minerals, ochres for reds and yellows, carbon-based compounds for blacks, and more complex mixtures for blues and greens. These pigments were often applied onto wet plaster in a technique known as fresco, allowing the colors to bond chemically with the surface as it dried. But the conditions at Yedala Monastery complicate this picture. The walls are not conventional plaster surfaces within constructed buildings. They are carved directly from granite, a material that does not easily accept or retain pigment in the same way. This raises critical questions about the methods used. Were the surfaces treated or coated before painting? Did the artists apply a preparatory layer to create a suitable ground? Or did they develop a technique specifically adapted to the challenges of rock-cut architecture? Equally intriguing is the issue of preservation. The Latmos region experiences significant environmental stress. Seasonal humidity from the nearby lake, temperature variations between day and night, and the gradual infiltration of water into cracks and crevices. Under such conditions, pigments would be expected to fade rapidly, flake away, or be entirely lost. Yet the frescoes of Yedala, though undeniably damaged, have not disappeared. Their persistence suggests that either the materials used were exceptionally durable, or that the microenvironment within the carved spaces provided a degree of protection. The orientation of the chambers, the thickness of the surrounding rock, and the limited exposure to direct sunlight may all have contributed to a relatively stable internal climate. If this was intentional, it would imply a level of environmental awareness that goes beyond simple craftsmanship and enters the realm of applied knowledge, an understanding of how to create not just a space, but a controlled environment within the constraints of nature. There is also a symbolic dimension to consider. In Byzantine thought, images were not merely decorative. They were theological instruments, windows into the divine. The act of painting sacred figures within a secluded rock-cut sanctuary transforms the space into something more than a physical shelter. It becomes a spiritual landscape. The persistence of these images, even in their degraded state, reinforces this transformation. They serve as a bridge between the temporal and the eternal, between the human effort that created them and the divine presence they were meant to invoke. In this sense, the survival of the frescoes is not just a technical mystery, but a philosophical one. Why do these images endure when so much else has been lost? What does their persistence tell us about the intentions of those who created them? The broader context of Yedila Monastery only amplifies these questions. The site does not appear to have been continuously occupied, nor does it feature prominently in historical records. Its abandonment remains undocumented, its decline unrecorded. It simply fades from the narrative, leaving behind a physical trace that resists easy interpretation. This absence of historical context forces us to rely on the material evidence itself, to read the stone and the pigment as if they were texts. And what these texts reveal is a story that is at once deeply human and profoundly enigmatic. A small group of individuals withdrawing from the world, carving a place for themselves in one of the most inhospitable landscapes available, and then covering the walls of that place with images meant to transcend time. In the end, Yedila Monastery is not a mystery because it is completely unknown, but because it is only partially known. We can identify its structures, analyze its materials, and situate it within a general historical framework. But we cannot fully reconstruct the intentions, the daily experiences, or the inner lives of the people who inhabited it. The frescoes, which with their lingering colors and incomplete forms, stand as both evidence and enigma, proof that something significant once took place here, and a reminder that its full meaning remains just beyond our reach. And perhaps that is the most enduring mystery of all. Not how these paintings have survived for so long, but why they continue to speak to us across centuries of silence from a place that was never meant to be found. In your opinion, what truly allowed the frescoes at Yedila Monastery to survive for centuries? Advanced ancient techniques, unique environmental conditions, or something else we still don't fully understand? Share your thoughts in the comments below.